Modern or prehistoric? You won't believe how old this really is. The first carbonated drink to be sold to the public was invented by Swiss watchmaker and amateur scientist J.J. Schwepp in 1783, who sold his delicious, sparkling water to thirsty customers in Geneva. In just 7 years, he was doing business so fast that he moved the factory to London and introduced a new flavor, sparkling lemon, to stand out from competitors who were trying to imitate his drink. Another related fun fact, seltzer and spa are where bubbly water comes from. Prior to industrialization, the only way to get bubbly water was to get it from carbonated springs, two of the biggest of which were in Niederselter and Spa, among others. The auxiliary connector that we still use for headphones and speakers was invented in 1877. There have been improvements since, but the basics of it are pretty much the same. Beer is thought to be older than bread. It's much easier to fill a jar with wheat and water and let it ferment and brew beer than it is to grind grain, mix it, and bake it. So you're telling me sliced bread is the greatest thing since beer? Huh. Sharks. As a species, they're older than the rings of Saturn. Holy crap, I've heard of the tree thing, but this is new to me. Just Google it, it's real quick. The rings of Saturn are 10 to 100 million years old, whereas we found shark scales dating back 450 million years ago. Pretty crazy stuff. I'm gonna add to this, scorpions are also nearly 450 million years old, so it kinda shows that you don't need that much brain to survive if your species is evolutionarily overkill. It'll survive just fine. National Geographic was founded in 1888, same year as Foster's and Jack the Ripper. I was really surprised to discover when Oxford University was founded. They don't know the year for sure, but they know there was definitely teaching going on there in 1096. It's not even the world's oldest university, either. Escalators have been around since 1859, though they were called rotating stairs. And yet the state of Wyoming still only has 2 of them. Granted, it's not like Wyoming has enough people to really need any more. Wristwatches. Queen Elizabeth I got one in 1571. I take no pride in the fact that in my head this was a Flintstone-style wrist-mounted sundial. Silly brain. They had mechanical clocks for a while before this. In fact, in the following comment, somebody's pointed out that possibly the greatest mechanical timepiece ever was invented in that same century. In a more extreme development, we had alarm clocks that rode themselves down a table and shot off mini-cannons in the 1500s. Cruise control, power windows, and automatic headlights. I saw all 3 on a 1955 Cadillac. Oh, and the radio on it had a seek function. Touch screens. We think they're one of the main defining features of modern tech since they only really got big in the late 2000s and early 2010s, but they were actually invented 55 years ago in 1965. It's kinda crazy to think about, but while most of our grandparents were getting rid of their black and white TVs, researchers already had touchscreen devices in the labs. It wasn't really until the 80s that it got really good, but by the 90s it was easily sophisticated technology. In fact, Microsoft even had a Windows XP tablet out by 2001 that had seriously good finger and stylus recognition, but it didn't really pick up until smartphones became a thing a decade later. You could also consider the magnetic drawing board to be a touchscreen since it was more or less a stylus and surface for you to draw on, but that was actually invented later than the touchscreen in 1974. Fax machines. They were invented in 1843, before the telephone. I came here for this one too. To put it in perspective, tumbleweeds aren't native to the American Southwest, but by a quirk of history, we know exactly which shipment of flax from Ukraine brought their seeds to the US. In 1877. Commercial fax service has been around longer than tumbleweeds in the American Southwest. Okay, so someone's already mentioned the popular fact that sharks are older than trees. Actually, the oldest evidence puts sharks in an era where the only multicellular plant was algae. Update. Oh, you guys, sharks weren't eating the algae, they were eating what ate the algae. The ancient Romans, well, the wealthy ones, had central heating in their homes. You can actually still see the pipes from some of the buildings at Herculaneum. What I think is really cool from Herculaneum is that we're able to recover writing from the libraries there. The pyroclastic flow didn't turn the papyrus to ash, it preserved it in a very damaged state. But thanks to lasers, we can see the words that were once visible on the pages. Flushing toilets date all of the way back to the Indus River Valley civilization back in 2000 BC. Ancient Minoans, 3000 to 1100 BCE, they had hot and cold running water and an extensive sewage system. and Romans had pipe-heated floors, something I still thought was awesome when my aunt got it like a decade ago. Oreos. I was shocked to learn that Oreos predate chocolate chip cookies, sliced bread, and my 100-year-old grandmother. 1912, for those of you wondering. The sentiment that modern society is degenerate and that the youth are to blame is, if I recall correctly, one of the oldest things we have written down. That I can remember off the top of my head, Cato the Elder complained that the younger generations were becoming too Greek, and Socrates used to complain that the younger generations were ruining their brains by writing instead of memorizing information. There are far more older examples, but these are the eldest that I can remember. Maybe Socrates was onto something. One of the reasons I like ancient poetry is the fact that most of the people problems are basically still the same. We think about our problems as being new and unique to us, but 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, people wrote about their stupid friends, coward coworkers, cheating jerks, and of course, stupid stubborn old people and reckless disrespectful young idiots. You want more of that kind of thing? Look up the Pompeii graffiti. We literally have not changed as a species. Brain surgery. In 1977, archaeologists discovered an ancient tomb in the French village of Ensisheim from 5000 BC, which contained the decomposing body of a 50-year-old man with holes in his skull. After a thorough examination, it was determined that the holes were located near the frontal lobe, were caused by a type of surgery, not by forced trauma, and the operation appears to have been successful because the wounds healed before the patient's death. To this day, however, researchers can't for sure say what exactly the surgery was trying to fix. This might have been trepanation, the deliberate practice of drilling a hole into the skull for medical reasons, like headaches, epilepsy, head trauma, mental disorders, and letting out evil spirits. You know, the usual reasons. Light. It might only take 8 minutes for light to travel to Earth from surface of the Sun, but the light bounces around inside the Sun for over 10,000 years before it reaches the surface. The name Tiffany. It dates back to the 12th century and has actually led to a thing in writing called the Tiffany problem. Because you can have a well-researched historical novel, and people just don't buy into it because you named your 12th century peasant Tiffany. It just sounds laughably anachronistic. The Tiffany problem makes me think of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice and the name Jessica. He wanted the love interest, who was Jewish, to have a super exotic name, so he invented the name Jessica. The name has become so common since then that it's literally lost its effect. Shakespeare also randomly invented the word gossip, because he needed to define a bunch of wives in the town talking crap and spreading rumors. And now it's part of the common English language. Astronomer here. The star HD 140283, also nicknamed the Methuselah star. It's about 200 light-years away from us and looks nondescript. However, if we take its composition and compare it to our standard models of stellar evolution for other better-studied stars, the star's age pops out as 14.46 plus 0.8 billion years old. Let me remind you, the universe is thought to be about 13.8 billion years old, and we don't think we got the first stars until maybe 200 million years after that. Obviously, we don't think that the Methuselah star is literally older than the universe when it's more likely that we just don't understand stellar evolution for stars like it super well. However, it is exciting, because it's undoubtedly a very old star, and currently we don't have any observations of what the first stars were like in the universe. They're called population 3 stars. It's thought they were larger than stars are today because there were no metals from stellar fusion to contaminate the hydrogen gas, and they'd thus only lived to be a few million years old, tops. As such, it's very interesting to have a very old star relatively next door to us in the Milky Way. It'll be really interesting in the coming years if other very early stars are finally observed to figure out how old they are and how they compare to this one. Paul Rudd. Nintendo. This company was actually created in 1889. I don't know if this counts, but dinosaurs lived on the Earth a lot longer than most people think. Dinosaurs, like the Stegosaurus, were as far apart in time from the T-Rex as the T-Rex is from our time. When you think of dinosaurs, you think of their extinction, but they roamed the Earth for 165 million years. Compare that to our 6 million and it's almost mind-boggling, at least in my opinion. The modern form of humans is 200,000 years old, but if we include our humanoid ancestors, we've been here 6 million years. Contraceptives, such as Johnnies, were around for a very long time and made of hard leather instead of rubber. There was a plant, I forget the name, that produced a contraceptive compound at a high enough concentration where women could just eat it and they wouldn't get pregnant. Apparently Romans were thirsty as frick because those plants are extinct now because of overuse. The narrator was pretty certain that Johnnies weren't necessarily just leather, and he googled it and hey presto. Apparently we've been using pig and sheep bladders since animal husbandry was a thing. Also, yes, my Google history and targeted ads are a mess because of this job. Thank you for asking. Beer. It's one of the oldest prepared drinks in the world. It not only predates every civilization, but actually contributed to their creation. It's a tale as old as time, getting effing blitzed to forget your problems. Trees. There are a lot of trees way older than you would expect. The oldest tree recorded on this planet is Methuselah, which is about 4,000 years old, but I'm pretty sure there are older ones out there that we aren't aware of. Okay, update after a quick bit of research, I found out that there's an older one discovered in Inyo National Forest that's about 5,000 years old. We'll probably keep finding older ones in the coming years. We are farther away from the release date of the first Back to the Future movie than Marty was from 1955. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Social media. Wealthy ancient Romans had a system where they used slaves as scribes and messengers in order to share gossip and art and poetry and news updates with their friends in their social circle. If that doesn't count as social media, then in the late 1800s, all telephone operators for trains were connected to each other by telephone, and if there were no trains coming, they could talk to each other as much as they wanted. Some people even fell in love with the operator on the other side of the phone and arranged for actual weddings across the other side of the country. Some, of course, had virtual weddings, but I'm not even sure how that would work in that time. A lot of modern conventions and tech are older than we think. Stonehenge. It predates the oldest pyramid in Egypt by nearly 300 years. Google, Reddit, YouTube. It's hard to imagine that they've already been around for 20 years, with Google actually being around 25 years old. An entire generation has now grown up that can't remember that it wasn't always there. As someone that was in high school when the internet hit the mainstream, it boggles my mind that pretty much anyone younger than me has no concept of life without the answer to any question imaginable being at your fingertips, hindered only by your patience to sift through the results. Ancient Egyptians who built the pyramids. The ancient Egyptians were as old to the ancient Romans as the ancient Romans are to us. Yeah, Cleopatra is chronologically closer to us than she is to when the pyramids were built. Netflix. I feel like it's only a few years old, but it was invented in 1997. Anyone else remember getting DVDs by mail? Contact lenses. Leonardo da Vinci had the idea of contact lenses in 1508, and the first successful contact lenses were made in 1888. They were made of glass and incredibly uncomfortable. Honestly though, that you can set a piece of plastic on your eyeball that magically corrects your vision still astounds me. The use of concrete. Its use goes as far back as the Mayans, but more notably in Egyptian construction as well as in Rome. The Romans had an arguably greater concrete mix than we currently have, but that was never passed down. Eventually, the use of concrete fell out of popularity for centuries as we seemingly lost the information needed to create it, as if the recipe was thrown out and nobody wrote it down. Roman concrete is not only more eco-friendly, but with the world's supply of silica sand running dry at an alarming rate, with some countries like Vietnam at risk of running out of sand as soon as 2022, there's a need to find an alternative method. The Romans created concrete after possibly seeing the natural results through something called tuff rocks. This is the combo of volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. Because of the addition of seawater to the mix, two very rare minerals, aluminous tobamite and philipsite, grew within the concrete. These minerals actually make the concrete mix stronger over time when exposed to seawater, which is in direct opposition to what happens to Portland concrete or basically any modern-day concrete, which erodes when exposed to seawater. We still don't know the recipe needed to make the concrete the ancient Romans made, but we can try to make it through reverse engineering and many countless experiments. Today, scientists are not only looking into this, but also an alternative to modern-day concrete, because of that diminishing presence of silica sand around the world and the carbon offset created when making it while trying to quench the high demand for concrete globally. Also, Samuel L. Jackson. The man is 71 years old, but he looks like he hasn't aged in decades. Oxford University. It's older than the Aztec Empire. Also, the Aztec Empire is much more recent than most people think. Humans with our intelligence and empathy and rationality. People in the past may have lacked education and our cumulative knowledge, but even cavemen thousands of years ago didn't differ too much from us. The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, a documentary about cave paintings from 30,000 years ago, really drove this home for me. The art there is so expertly rendered it really shows a thinking and curious mind. The food at the back of your cupboard. I've got a bottle of Worcester sauce that expired on the 28th of April 2009 in my fridge. That means that bottle, A, made the trip from New Jersey to Florida with me in 2010, B, is the lone survivor from my bachelor pad fridge from 2012 to 2014, and C, made it into my fridge when my wife and I bought a house in 2014. It's been sitting there ever since. Touchscreens in cars. That's been around since 1986. In my experience, a lot of people I know personally don't realize that music cassettes were invented in the 60s. Cassettes didn't really take off in the States until like the late 70s, but the first albums released on cassettes hit the shelves in 1966. Law. Roman law was so advanced that there are still large chunks of statutes, in civil law countries, taken pretty much directly from the Roman codicil, written 1500 to 2000 years ago. Important maritime laws are adaptations of medieval provisions as well. Lots of business law statutes borrow heavily from Napoleonic laws. In common law countries, you find stuff like the Statute of Marlborough from the 1200s still in effect, along with still relevant case law from the 1700s. European law student here. I'm literally studying Roman law right now for an upcoming exam, and it is an incredibly elaborate and thoughtful system, not to mention incredibly relevant. They are practically the reason why we have the system we have today and why jurisprudence is one of the main pillars of the Western judicial system. The wealthiest of the ancient Minoans had very close to modern-day plumbing. The entire Minoan culture is really fascinating, not to mention their poor choice of clothing. Commercial aircraft. Most are 10 to 15 years old, yet a lot of people think they get replaced like cars. They're still very safe though, despite their age. Well, that doesn't mean the demons in my head will let me feel any more safe or at ease until I'm off that damn flying coffin, does it? It could be a futuristic wondercraft, and part of my brain would still be telling me that we were mere seconds away from plunging to a fiery death. A lot of fads have this sense of modernity to them. That you have an Instagram influencer pushing a product and everyone leaps onto it in order to be hip and cool, but it's nothing compared to the way people followed trends in the past. I've written about the case of French people having rectal surgery because it was fashionable before, but there are dozens of examples. Even something as basic as the fork only became popular because Catherine de' Medici made it trendy in the courts of France. Before then, it was considered positively barbaric because it allowed you to eat too quickly and without grace. And then there are the fashion trends that were positively lethal, like lead oxides to whiten your skin for purely aesthetic reasons. After all, pale skin meant you weren't tanned, which was hard to pull off unless you were rich enough that you didn't have to work outside. You don't see a lot of pale farmers. And then you get what we call viral challenges today. You think planking was dumb? Well, you would have loved phone booth stuffing, which was huge in the 50s and involved trying to cram as many people as possible into a phone booth. Why? Just because. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The Stanley Cup. It predates the NHL, and if you look at the history of teams that have won it, there's a year where it wasn't awarded due to the Spanish flu pandemic. The top of it is the original trophy, but the rings on the bottom are replaced every couple of years when they fill up with names. A large portion of autism spectrum disorders, about 40% of them have been in human genetics since around 40,000 BCE. Goddamn genetic bottleneck causing supervolcano eruption. It's theorized that modern times are much harder on neurodivergent people of all sorts. For those on the spectrum, today is more louder and stressful. An autistic person who might struggle now with fluorescent lighting, loud office spaces, and chaotic schedules might have flourished being a shepherd or a baker hundreds of years ago. The world in general. The theory is that if all of Earth's history were laid out on a calendar, our current century would make up only the last 10 seconds or so of December 31st. It always blows my mind to consider it that way. It's smaller than that. The last 6 minutes, modern humans evolved. The Roman Republic was about the last 7 seconds. Columbus arrived in America 1 second to midnight. A Native American empire nearly a third the size of the present-day United States existed in the Great Lakes region at the time the Old Testament of the Bible was thought to be written. Local town has a huge mound from them and a fair bit of history. Stupid name though, they decided to call it Moundsville. Betty White. The 80s. They were 40 years ago, but it feels like 20 years ago. Paul Rudd and Gwen Stefani are both older than Ted Cruz. The word meme. People born in 2000. The theory of quantum mechanics. Some of the earliest discoveries in the field date back to the early 19th century, starting with Faraday's discovery of cathode rays in 1838. Gustav Kirchhoff's work on black-body radiation in 1850 and Boltzmann's theory of discrete energy was written in 1877. The name itself was coined by Max Born, Werner Heisenberg, and Wolfgang Pauli in the early 1920s. For comparison, the theory of plate tectonics was first put forward in 1912 and wasn't widely accepted until 1965. Little John. While in college, I discovered that my old trusty pre-game hype man was born the same year as my dad, and I'm 35 for scale. Suddenly, snap your fingers meant arthritic relief. The outline struggles with dementia in Out of Your Mind. Shots of Metamucil. Turn down for... Turn up your hearing aid. What? The 3.5mm headphone jack. Made in the 1950s for transistor radios. It originally developed from the quarter-inch plug, which was first used in a telephone switchboard in Boston around 1878. The song Black Betty by Ram Jam used to be a marching song in the Revolutionary War, and Black Betties were muskets, of course. The lyrics did change a bit, but it's still pretty cool that we're rocking out to songs created by people hundreds of years ago. Smut, as we know it today, predates sliced bread by at least 50 years. The oldest surviving hardcore adult film is, of course, a French film called Le Sud d'Or ou la Bonne Auberge, and was released in 1908. I have a bottle of shampoo from the GDR. Cardboard. Cardboard's been around since colonial times at least. I learned this at the bookmaker's shop in colonial Williamsburg a few years ago. It totally blew my mind. Aboriginal Australians, the oldest unbroken culture in the world, in Australia for more than 70,000 years. Santa Fe is the oldest capital in America, being declared the capital of New Mexican Territory by the Spanish Crown in 1610, making it 410 years old, far older than the US itself. Chuck Norris, that guy's 80. What's a glitch in the matrix you've used to coast through life? I got moved to a team on the 2nd floor. My desk was on the 4th floor. I stopped coming to work. The 4th floor team thought I moved downstairs. The 2nd floor team thought I was still upstairs. I just worked from home instead, for over a year. A while ago, I read about a forgotten employee who coasted by on a job he didn't understand. It was supposedly a true story. The author explains how they'd worked in a company for years, and at some point they were moved to a new position, within the same company. When he moved to the new position, no one really told him what the position actually was, and what he was meant to be doing. After a week, and then a month, he still didn't know, and it was too late to ask. So he was just filling time by coming into work and messing around all day. It had a bit about him getting a call from another company employee in a different city with the same job title. The author tried to pretend he knew what his job was before realizing the other guy was doing the exact same thing as him, and only called to try and find out from the author what the job might be. Whether it was true or not, it was a funny read. The article was called Forgotten Employee. Here's the quote. "The next day I showed up at work with a new purpose in life. What I'd come across was even better than having no job. I now have a job with no responsibilities." So there's a local convenience store called Sheets. A new store opened and they gave out sheets of 5 free coffee coupons. After a while, they just had them sitting out in a pile for you to grab. I asked one day if I could grab 2, and she said, "You can take the whole stack for all I care, we have a ton of those." So I did. I procured myself 500 free coffees. Sheets also has a rewards program. Every 10 coffees you buy, you get a free one. Every time I use a coupon, it still adds a coffee to my 10 count. I currently have 30 free coffees on my card and still a small stack of free coupons. Sheets is the best. One day the whole world will know that name. Not if that's their business strategy. A certain popular pizza chain in the UK once royally effed up my order, and head office sent me a voucher for a free pizza. Any pizza, any size. I've had it for nearly a year now, and the delivery guy has never asked for the voucher, so I've had a lot of free pizza. So you just kind of say, "I have a voucher for pizza" over the phone, and they trust you? Usually the guy on the phone doesn't have a clue. He puts me on hold, and then the manager asks a few questions, and every time they explain that I need to give the voucher to the pizza delivery guy. I never give the voucher, I'm never asked for the voucher, I've never been contacted about the voucher. I've used it on 2 to 3 stores, but I space it out because I'm scared they'll remember me. This is the sweetest deal, but these people eventually get found out most of the time, as the person in the next story can attest. Until last year, I'd been using an unrestricted free Big Mac coupon that I found on the internet. Not sure if someone edited it to remove the date or if they merely left it as an oversight, but I'd get a Big Mac every week and claim that I'd won a book with 52 of them. Eventually, a manager called my bluff and sent the coupon to someone higher up. Came back next week and saw it framed with a caption, "Longest running scam." I turned around and walked out. Once, cardamom pods were for sale at a local grocery, but instead of being $14.95 per ounce, the computer messed it up and they were $1.49 an ounce. I bought a lot of cardamom, and I made a lot of sweet buns. Thug life. There was a snack machine next to a soda machine. When you bought a snack, the soda machine would spit out a Mountain Dew. Another job had a soda machine where if you hit the button repeatedly after putting in your money, you'd get multiple sodas. A certain grocery store chain will offer you twice your money back if they sell you expired goods. While shopping, I specifically look for expired items, buy them, and then return them to the customer service for double my money. Sometimes they give me cash, other times they give me gift cards to the store. I'm fine with either. I bet the company wouldn't even mind if they found out you were doing it intentionally. They've essentially hired you to clean the store of expired goods, and probably, from their perspective, not paying you a ton of money to do it. Yeah, my employer HEB just ended their out-of-date guarantee in May. It was if you found an expired item, you'd get the same item for free. We had a lot of people that took advantage of it, but even so, my manager explained to me that if they're able to find that much expired product on our shelves, that means things aren't being rotated correctly, and therefore someone we pay isn't doing their job correctly. So why not give the customer some sort of compensation for doing a job we should be doing, keeping expired product off the shelves? I downloaded LimeWire Pro off LimeWire. Holy crap, people still use LimeWire? I was using that back in the 5th grade, early 2000s, I think. A global hotel chain ran a promotion a few years ago where they sent a link to book a night's free stay. There was nothing to stop you from using the link repeatedly. I was stuck at Union Station in DC during Hurricane Sandy, and I used that glitch to house a lot of fellow stranded travelers. They either figured it out or the promo ended, but it went on for 9 months. Years ago, I was a cashier at a grocery store, and there was a glitch where the really expensive fancy ice cream that cost about $8 scanned as $2. All the cashiers knew about it, and we'd regularly buy a ton of the stuff. Very few customers bought that kind of ice cream, and if they noticed it scanning cheaper, we'd just wink at them. It went on for months until anyone noticed. I found out that the Target near me was only charging $8 for silverware that I think was supposed to be $28. I bought 2 sets of them, then went to another Target for a third, but that one charged me full price. I returned to the first Target, then went back the next day and got it for $8. Now I have so much silverware I can't even fit it all in the dishwasher. If you push the Diet Orange Fanta button on the drink machine on the 2nd floor of my dorm building, it instead gives you 2 bottles of water and sometimes lemonade. I decided to buy a chocolate orange at a local supermarket. Took it to the self-checkout and it scanned with the value of 1 pence. So I got my friends to run back and clear the shelves of chocolate oranges and bring them back to the till. Got 30 chocolate oranges for 30 pence. I used to work for a web host. We had a referral program that tracked your customers by cookie. I had set up a referral site for myself and showed a coworker without thinking about it. From then on, whenever a customer would sign up over the phone with him, it earned me about $50. There was a gumball machine at the grocery store that would spit out 4+ pieces of candy if you turned the crank really slowly. Yeah, some old ones had a very simple scoop and dump mechanism, and they just locked after a revolution, so if you held it just right, there would be a hole there and you could shake a ton of candy out. Public transit in my area sells day passes for $9. I've used the same day pass for 2 years. When I was basically homeless back in high school, I'd get day passes from a shelter to go to school. I was often able to use the same one without getting the months or days punched out for multiple days, depending on how much of a crap a given bus driver gave. Not too long after I figured that out, I could punch the holes in the date areas halfway and fold the paper back just a little, so it looked properly punched and therefore valid. Every day I would fold the used day back and tape the backside. Thus I could use a ticket for a whole week or 2. I'd use the extras I got to give to trolley cops who would scrutinize tickets and passes and otherwise reuse the same ticket over and over. I've been gaming the free stuff for your birthday racket for several years. Most of the restaurants and businesses don't check for your actual birth date, So I use different months with different businesses so the discounts and meals are spread through the year. To be fair, as long as he's only claiming a single birthday with each business, it doesn't matter that he's giving different businesses different dates. No one's ever called me out on it, but as long as I'm not trying to get more than one birthday deal a year, why would they care? I rarely celebrate my birthday on the actual day anyway. It's December 27th, and if it's a weekday, I have work. This is a man who has decided that if Christmas is going to steal the thunder of his birthday, he's going to steal more birthday thunder from all his local restaurants and businesses. I don't approve, but it has a fun, petty supervillain quality to it. You know how I keep exploiting my glitches in the Matrix? I never tell anyone what I'm doing. Worked at a popular pizza chain some years ago. Automated phone system had a glitch that told customers we were closed an hour before we actually did close. Never corrected it because I can do tasks to close the store on time. One vending machine at my school would give you $4.50 in change when purchasing a $2.50 bottle of pop with a $5 note. A $10 or $20 note would give correct change. 50 cents for a bottle of pop. Yes, please. I once bought a $1.50 bag of chips from a vending machine. I paid with a toonie, which is a Canadian $2 coin. It gave me back 10 quarters, $2.50 in change. So I made $1 off a bag of chips. Even the vending machines are nice in Canada. I have a lot of traffic lights on the first mile or two of my drive to work, so I leave at 6:55 and I get to work 15 minutes early because I catch blinking yellows. I used to leave at 7 and get there just on time, and any extra traffic made me late. When I was 13 or 14, I had a sweet tooth and no money for sating it. Luckily, all the kids at the private school I went to did have money, so my best friend and I devised a plan to separate them from that money. Every morning before school, we'd go into the local co-op, buy various snacks, chocolate bars, flapjacks, crisps, etc., and take them to school in our bags. Then we'd run a small black market out of our lockers during breaks. There were no vending machines in the school and very few snacks available from the refectory, so we were completely in control of the market and made a lot of money. One year, this went into overdrive for Easter, making us over 400% our usual profit due to a pricing error at the coop. 6 Cadbury cream eggs were being sold for £3.99, giving us a $2 profit when we sold them for £1 each to our eager peers. But 12 cream eggs were only £3.69, giving us over £8 profit per pack. With cream eggs being a seasonal item, they were immensely popular at school. After a month or so, regrettably, someone picked up on the error and corrected it in their system. When we walked up to the till with 4 12-packs each, we discovered they were now priced at £6.99. So I assume they should have been all along. Luckily, when our faces fell and we explained they were only £3.69 on the shelves, the cashier rang them up at their shelf price. The next day, they were back to their usual price though, on the shelves and system, so we went back to our old ways of scamming slightly less money out of our peers. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, the soda machine at the pool didn't recognize when you'd hit the coin return. You could just cycle the same dime through the machine enough times and then make your selection. You'd even get your dime back at the end. When I was 7 on Halloween, I dressed up as Batman, then hit all the houses in my neighborhood. It was only 8, so then I dressed up as Spider-Man and got all of the houses again. Double the candy, mother effers. I miss all the candy, so I'm thinking of trick-or-treating this year as an adult. Not really a glitch, but I found out I could fit my arm into the vending machine at college and pretty much cleared out the bottom shelf. Fish and chips shop near my house. Gumball machine inside. Put money in and turn for 9 clicks. Hold dial in position. Flick a few times just underneath the dial. Turn for 1 more click and hold in position. Gumballs will continue to be released for as long as you hold it there. $1, unlimited gumballs. How could you possibly learn that? He started with 1 click. I had a Pepsi machine at college that ate people's change returns. I figured out how to get it unstuck and usually ended up with a soda and $4 every time I went to it. My Sprint phone gave me a Wi-Fi hotspot without me paying for it for about a year. I updated the firmware and lost the functionality, so I called Sprint to ask what was wrong. I was supposed to be paying for the Wi-Fi ability, $30 a month, and the lady asked if I'd been using it for the past year. I hung up, saved myself $360 without even knowing. My old job had a pretty high turnover in terms of managers, so none of them really had time to learn the intricacies of our building, nor the abundance of legacy and experimental job titles that people had been assigned. As the lone stockroom attendant, I used my knowledge of the basements and the fact that no one, including me, knew what the heck I was supposed to be doing to go and have naps or generally hide and do nothing for most of the day. Purchased a 3-day trial for a website. Cancelled it on the 3rd day. Access to the site remained active for the next 7 years. All I get from my internet provider is internet, but they do provide cable TV. So I thought, what would happen if I plugged my internet cable into my TV? Well, now I get basic cable for free, like 50 to 70 channels. I never use it though. Children think Netflix is the way TV is supposed to be. F all of those commercials and not picking exactly what you want on TV. They just didn't put a filter on your line. The cable guy messed up either when disconnecting previous service or setting your new service up. Your internet traffic operates on a different frequency than the video traffic. The filter gets rid of the cable TV transmission, so it's easy to remove them too if you know what you're doing. All you need is a way to get into the box, the keys are available on eBay, and a coaxial barrel connector to replace the filter. You might want to take a wrench too because the connections can be hard to break if it's been on for a while. My college gave out 10 free rubbers if you show school ID, but they don't scan it or anything, so I sometimes on the weekends would come in every 20 minutes, getting more and more protection until I had a stockpile. Then at night I would go around to parties selling them for $1 each. I feel like every university I've been to provides hundreds of free contraceptives if you know where to go. Then again, it's also a very typical move to go to a party without one of the hundreds that you have stashed away in your room, so fair play. WinRAR. Or is it supposed to be free? Wait, there's a paid version? Sam's Club once gave out a coupon that gave $5 off any cheese. All of their cheese at that point came in sub-$5 increments, and they didn't take the coupon at the end, they only scanned it. That weekend was the first wine and cheese party I'd ever hosted. In high school, I would go to the attendance office and say I needed to go home. The attendance lady would give me the phone to call my dad so she could talk to him to verify. I would instead call my deep-voiced friend and he would excuse me. Then he would go in about 30 minutes later and call me. Worked over 20 times and we were never caught. Best part, it didn't count as a missed class because it was excused. Nice job. You got out of a free education. Back in the day, there was an awesome MUDD called Dragon's Gate on AOL that was something like $2 an hour to play. It had a great community and it was a ton of fun. This was in dial-up days, so if you purposefully slowed your connection down by downloading something and logging into the game, you could hit spacebar on the sign-in screen a crapload of times and it would open up 2 screens. Just close the first one and it signs you out while still being connected, and you can play through the second screen for free. The best part was all the hate from other people on the forums when the glitch finally got outed. My first job in high school. I'm a habitually early person, so I found out that the time clock system would let me clock in 5 minutes early. I later found out that I could then clock out 10 minutes early and I'd be paid for all 5 hours. Another guy, an older man, worked 8-hour shifts and would save his 2 15-minute breaks, union job, and half-hour lunch and do his shopping for the week in his last hour. Now, I'm a truck driver. I'm home every day, so I don't really need the half-hour break we have to take, so I take one that logs in my book as a half-hour. I think this is a glitch that the company might know about, as so many local people talk about it. Okay, the shop is Waitrose in the UK. Big chain supermarket. They do various deals where a product is £5, but if you buy 3, then you get all of them for £10. Now, the glitch works when they reduce the product as its expiry date is near. So, now the product is down to £1, regularly less. The thing is, if you still buy 3 at the reduced price, the offer still kicks in and it takes £5 off your bill. The last time I did this, I noticed that a bag of potatoes was reduced to 30 pence, but it was buy 3 for £5. I ended up buying 9 pounds of potatoes and got the rest of my shopping for free. Wine, beer, pizza, all free. You just have to make sure your bill does have a positive balance in the end, even if it's only pennies. I go down near closing time 3/4 of the nights a week and get this deal. It doesn't always get you the extra free stuff, but you usually get the 3 products for free. The products can be fresh meats, vegetables, fruit, and the pre-made meals like spag bol and pizza. In Counter-Strike Source, you can get outside the map in DE Piranesi in Counter-Strike Spawn. I sometimes just glitch outside of it and kill people from spawn. It freaks a lot of people out. You monster! I'd paid for a relatively slow internet connection, but I used it to get about 10 times faster internet with unlimited data. It was fun for a while. I wrote a program in Python that pretty much does my job for me the first day I went there. I do nothing at work all day besides Reddit and fun side projects with code. I got a TI-85 calculator from a thrift store for $1. I'd do the same thing with math work at school. If I know the material well enough to write a program to do it on my calculator, I figured it was good enough. I did this in DOS batch many years ago. I had one physical task which took about 3 minutes a day, and everything else could be largely automated. Free glasses from Coastal.com. They have a free first pair deal, so you just keep making new Gmail addresses and use the coupon code. They don't check the shipping address, plus you can claim it's for family members or roommates. All you have to pay for is shipping. I have like 5 pairs. I have a 25% off code that I use for travel I book online fairly often. It was supposed to only be valid for a specific time period. That time period went over a year ago, and the code still works fine on the website. I get 25% off my travel every time. I think my free 6-month trial of Amazon Prime for students was supposed to end 5 years ago. I'm still a student, so I don't feel too bad about it. In early college, some friends and I were in the student union food court getting some frozen treats from a vending machine. We noticed the digital screen that usually says, "Insert bills face up" or whatever said, "Test Vend." Basically, you'd push a button and it'd just give you that selection without putting in any money. We got so many ice cream bars that we were giving them away to random students as we passed by. When I was in college, the sign-up system for classes was paper-based. You could get into any closed section by having your buddy drop that section, even if he wasn't taking it. Also, there was a men's room at the head of the line. Sometimes, right before the doors opened for registration, there would be about 50 people in that men's room. The train to my work and back costs £3.40 a day, and the machines have had trouble taking change in the past, so for about 5 months I've decided to not pay for a ticket. The fine for not having a ticket is £20. As long as I don't get caught for a weekend a day, I'm golden. That was until they decided to put more inspectors on the trains. Getting guac at Chipotle. My local team never passes it down the line, so I never get charged for it. Man, my local Chipotle practically assigns an armed guard to my burrito when I ask for guac. Then I visit my sister in San Diego and a restaurant serves what would have been $45 worth of guac at Chipotle prices. What's your profession's most interesting fact or secret? As a structural engineer, an engineer designs buildings and structures with precise calculations and computer simulations of behavior during various combinations of wind, seismic, flood, temperature events, and vibration loads using mathematical equations and empirical relationships. The engineer uses the sum of structural engineering knowledge from the past millennium, at least 9 years of study and rigorous examinations to predict the worst outcomes and deduce the best design. We use multiple layers of fail-safes in our calculations, from approximations by hand calculations to refinement with finite element analysis, from elastic theory to plastic theory, with safety factors and multiple redundancies to prevent progressive collapse. We accurately model an entire city at reduced scale for wind tunnel testing and use ultrasonic testing for welds at connections. But the construction worker straight out of high school puts it all together as cheaply and quickly as humanly possible, often disregarding signed and sealed design drawings for their own improvised field fixes. Research is never as cool as you think it is, even when there's fire and lasers involved. Most of the equipment I use is more than 20 years old and often duct-taped together. You're in research and you still have equipment? I just write frickin' grants all day. Amen to this. Plus, it's often shoved in the basement or some windowless, dusty room with moldy pipes. And there's an incessant hum from the machinery that kind of makes you go Edgar Allan Poe story insane. Real estate. Everything is negotiable, especially the fee. Serial renter here, I've never paid the asking price. Actually, that's not quite true. One time they wouldn't budge on that but installed a brand new kitchen instead. In the army, you'll do a hell of a lot of landscaping. Oh man, when the new CG came to Fort Carson, he put out a memo that soldiers are not to be pulling weeds or edging. We can mow lawns, but no weeds. It's asinine to create busy work for soldiers who are essentially just between deployments. Either train, do associated work, send them to college, or give them time off, was the new guy's policy. Casino security. If you're ever in a casino and you see a chair tipped over against a wall or covered in a garbage bag, don't sit in it. The odds are that someone has either crapped, peed, or thrown up on themselves on it. Why didn't they get up? Because the next slot was going to be a winner. That is simultaneously sickening and not at all surprising. Stay classy, casino goers. Also of note is that it's apparently so common that it's an acknowledged thing across multiple venues. Mortician here. The butt cavity of corpses has to be sewn shut, or the corpse could toot during the funeral. Visual effect artist. Actors are modified in movies as they are in magazines. Skin correction, awkward smile correction, one eye is closed more than the other in a frame. We correct that. Smaller waist, longer legs, bigger arms, six-pack. There's a lot of fake involved. Meat processor. Many of the people who work in the industry are convicted felons who don't give a crap about food safety processes. One USDA agent cannot monitor the actions of 250 people. We deal with listeria on a daily basis, and sometimes it gets so out of hand that we have to shut down lines. The meat done that day still gets sent out, though. The most terrifying story in this group goes to you, my friend. I used to work in a meat department in a grocery store. My supervisor had a skid of 100 vacuum-sealed packs of pea-meal bacon. She'd over-ordered. There was a milky white liquid in the packages because the bacon expired 2 weeks ago. She asked me to take the bacon out of the vacuum seal, cut them, put them on trays, wrap them, price them, and put the expiry date for 5 days away. I quit my job, reported to the head office, and left. This same manager also asked me to take expired chicken wings, put them in a sink with diluted bleach in it, let them soak, rinse them, and retrade them with a new expiration date. Oh, and if your frozen meat looks freezer burnt, it's because A. Some idiot kid left the skid out on the floor all night and put it in the freezers the next day. B. It's old. Or C. The bunker or freezer stopped working but was up and running again the next day. I'm now a vegan after working there. In conclusion, meat manager wanted me to sell bacon that expired 2 weeks before and sell expired chicken wings that were left in a tub of diluted bleach. Nom nom. All help desks are really just masters of Google. I worked at a children's hospital. When a young person dies, the bodies are transported to the morgue in stretchers disguised as what appears to be tall, covered mobile linen racks. This is done in order to not distress parents of other patients. If the person moving the rack's hands are uncovered, it's actually bed linens. However, if they're wearing latex gloves, well, you know. I worked at an amusement park. The ride operators that you trust so dearly with your lives and checking your restraints are mostly kids who do nothing, and their main job is to count how many people are on the ride. I had a chest restraint actually come unlocked when I checked it once, and my coworker tried to convince me to run the ride anyway. I'm a professor at a large university. Most days, I don't feel like an expert at all. Welcome to academia, world-class specialists with inflated senses of inferiority. Disability insurance. We hire private investigators to videotape people and hunt around for them online all the gosh darn time if they're suspected of fraud. I can't count the number of videos I've seen of people dancing at nightclubs and posting on Meetup begging for a cross-country ski partner while they're claiming they're in too much pain to do their desk jobs and collecting huge disability checks. I have no pity either. People like that make it much harder for people with actual problems to get the benefits they require to get better, which is heartbreaking. I'm a debt collector. We can settle for pretty much anything. What's the best way to get the lowest possible settlement? I don't know anything about first-party collections, so this advice is only for charged-off debt that has either been A. Sold out to a debt buyer who divvies it out among their law offices or collection offices, or B. Sent to a collection agency as a portfolio. Find out the age of your debt. If it's brand new, same month, they'll take anything to liquidate for that month. Aim for 50%. I've been given 42% as my lowest possible percentage. The older it gets, the lower you should aim. If this debt has been passed through about 3 agencies, start super low. I'm talking 10 cents on the dollar, especially if your debt is 5 digits. If you've been sued, then it gets trickier. Find out the status of your debt. Small claims or county civil, arbitration, just sued, judgment recently awarded, judgment awarded 5 years ago. Are they executing yet? Garnishment, bank levy, writs of execution. Go from there. Find out if you're exempt from any execution of payment. If you are, start crazy low because they can't do crap to you. If you aren't, be nice and work something out as soon as possible. Start at 50%. If it's an arbitration, offer 10 cents on the dollar, and if they don't meet you somewhere reasonable, get an attorney because you can fight this. Never be afraid to walk away, but always do it as nicely as possible. If you run into a butthole who claims he or she is the only person you can speak to, he or she is lying. Ask for a supervisor. Be nice. Don't let him or her provoke you. Call at the end of the month. If you can pay that day, call on the last business day of the month, and you'll get a great deal. Start super low, way lower than you actually have. I think that's basic negotiation. Once you've come to an agreement, get it in writing before paying, and pay by verified funds if possible. Credit card, cashier's check, money order, Western Union. Make sure you have easy access to a fax machine and email, and for God's sake, get a letter with all the account numbers. Original creditor account number as well as the in-house account number for the collection agency or law firm, with a signature stating that your account is closed. Keep that crap forever and ever. By the way, if you save $600 or more in principal or charge-off amount, then you'll be sent a 1099 at the end of the year. I've had people settle debts that are like $10K, and $6K of that is the charge-off amount. They settle for $3K and get a $3K 1099 that they have to pay taxes on as income. Take this with a grain of salt and confer with your tax preparer or whatever before accepting it as fact. I'm a lifeguard. I've seen a lot of kids get certified that would probably fall apart if a real emergency occurred while they were on duty.
I'm also a lifeguard and also definitely one of these kids. Luckily, I don't think anyone has gone in the pool I watch for 3 years.
I'd never thought about this, but it makes complete sense. This is a job that might often have teens or other people between jobs applying. Also, it's made me realize that a lot of American TV shows featuring teens normally has at least one who works a summer job as a lifeguard. Doctor here. We don't always have a way of figuring out what's wrong with you. There's no magic tests that will prove beyond any doubt exactly what you have. Furthermore, diagnosis of disease is not reached by following an algorithm. This isn't math. Your body didn't read my textbook, and way more often than not, there's not something I'm missing. In fact, every doctor I know orders way too darn many tests just to be sure they don't miss anything. Dumb doctors are few and far between. Jerks are not, but don't confuse the two. It took over 100 years of medical science to establish certain diseases as distinct entities, and many are rare or have convoluted criteria that only a few patients actually fill. So be patient and realize that I'm human and can't retain the entirety of my medical knowledge within my brain, and know that I'm working hard to help you get better. And you will be the last thing I think about before I go to sleep. The frozen yogurt where I work at is not fat-free or organic as we're made to say. The yogurt culture, a small cup of actual yogurt used to make the 4 gallons of the mixture, is organic. However, the milk, yogurt base, and flavoring used to make what's essentially 95% of the served product is not. In a way, the yogurt is organic and fat-free. What you're eating is far from that. Sales. The more expensive something is, the less logic people use to decide if they're going to buy it. People will buy a $50,000 car because it's red and scrutinize the calories in a $1.50 snack. Oh, and for all you tech guys, this is especially true when your boss is deciding what equipment or network options you're going to have. Chances are he bought what he did because someone gave him tickets to a sporting event, not because it's what you actually needed or requested. I work at a college dining hall. The 4-cheese calzones really contain only 3 kinds of cheeses. A pinch of mozzarella gets sprinkled on the top, and that counts as the 4th cheese. You son of a witch! Service clerk. If something isn't on the shelf, then we most likely don't have it, and asking me to check the back for it really just gives me a chance to look at my phone for text messages. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work at a fireworks store. I answer your questions by reading the package and guessing what it does. Dry cleaning involves liquid. Nuclear non-proliferation analyst. Radiation monitors at ports of entry are better at detecting kitty litter and toilet seats than weaponized uranium. No worries, the contractor who sold the equipment made serious money on sales of those machines, and that's all that matters. I'm a roofer. We can't always get off the roof to pee. Where does it go? Firefighter. People actually die so quick from one breath of superheated air that they can remain standing up. Casino security here. Money talks. You play $20 a hand, maybe $1,000 between gambling and food and everything, and get in a fight in the hotel, and you're probably going to jail. At the very least, you're being removed from the hotel. On the other hand, if you spend hours at our high-stakes table, all other circumstances being equal, we'll come to the room, tell you you're disturbing your neighbors, and please don't do that again. Same with basically anything that happens in a casino. We hate the people with money because they can get away with being the biggest jerks on the planet. But since their one weekend keeps the lights on in our casino for 6 months, we have to let them do as they wish, basically. Orchestral musician. We fake a lot of that crap up there on stage. If you tilt your violin, you can go into overdrive to recover after missing too many notes. Meteorologist in school. The 5-day or 7-day or longer forecasts are completely useless and only made because people would get upset if we didn't have them. You could probably do just about as good yourself on anything more than 48 hours away, just by reasonably guessing based on the time of year. I wonder how many people actually remember what the 7-day forecast said 7 days ago about today. I'm gonna steal your suggestion and make a website or a widget or something. Would be pretty easy to post what the weather said it was going to be today a week ago, and then post actually what it is. How about stats that say the percentage of humidity they were close to or way off? Oh, who am I kidding? It'll never be made by me. Sushi chef. Ahi tuna is actually just yellowfin tuna. It's the lowest quality sushi-grade tuna you can get. People come in all the time and ask if we have ahi, then scoff when we say that we carry big eye and bluefin, which is the highest grade you can get. And if I tell them that, they think I'm trying to pull one over on them. Other insights? Ask the chef when they get their fish delivered. Try to come in on the days close to that. If it's nearing the end of the week, you're getting the older fish. Not really any dirty secrets, at least in my restaurant we're reasonably clean. Spicy tuna is usually made from older tuna that's still okay to eat raw but maybe changing color or developing an off taste. I thought it was common practice for sushi joints to get their fish delivered fresh every day. At least that's how it is at the places I frequent in California. Unless they're right on the coast, they're full of crap. Most places get it twice a week. And here was the narrator hoping to learn the secrets of whatever the chefs are shouting at us whenever we walk in the door. Yes, I know I could just Google it. Yes, I know it's probably not as exciting as I think. Let me live in childish wonder, people. Cupcake bakery. Contrary to popular belief, freezing cupcakes actually makes the cake more moist than the freshly baked cupcakes. In fact, we don't sell any cupcakes that were baked that day because they just aren't as moist as the ones that have been in our walk-in overnight. Comedy writer. It takes a team of people to make your favorite people look brilliant. I recently learned that comedy writers compose anecdotes for guests on late-night talk shows like Letterman and Fallon. It's obvious once you know this, but I'm embarrassed to say that I had no idea this occurred. Federal economist. If you call any of my agency's data helplines, you'll be connected with an actual economist to answer your questions. I've found that most statistical agencies are the same way. My company has a piece of software, hosted by us, in which the usernames and passwords are meaningless. It uses a long unencrypted number. When the customers call and ask us to change their username or password, we tell them to hold on, clack the keyboard a bit, and then tell them they're all set. High school English teacher. I wish we could skip through a lot of the required texts too, but I hope my annoying enthusiasm will get us all through alive. I also answer more questions about grammar from other English teachers than from my students. I think the only reason they ask me is because they know I'm a freelancer on the side, so write more often than they do. Vet tech. If it seems like your pet has spent an unusually long amount of time in the back, it might be because we think it's extra cute and are petting it and playing with it or taking it around for all the employees to fawn over. For any skeptics, obviously there are many reasons why we've had your pet a little longer than usual, but this is definitely one of them, and it's my favorite. Nurse here. In nursing homes, we do every disgusting thing. Creams for your downstairs area? Yep. Suppositories? Yep. Putting your eggplant in a urinal and then holding it there so you can pee? Of course. We do all these things for the human body on a regular basis and we rarely get thanked for it. So please be nice. Also, a little added extra from my years as a hotel front desk agent, we can see the titles of all the adult flicks you watch and how long you did that for. So if you come down to the front desk and play it like it was a mistake, I'll know you watched F My Randy Wife for 47 minutes, and it will be very awkward. Catalyst synthesis chemist. The stuff I produce can make 20 tons of polypropylene from 1 gram of my material. Always blows my mind. Industrial engineer. Your company's processes are always going to have room for improvement because we need the work. Environmental scientist. Water from a municipal water source is just as or more sanitary than bottled water. Marketing and PR. Most of the magazine articles you read are influenced by the advertising dollars spent or the schmoozing by the PR pros. A human body cannot be completely consumed in a fire. I'm referring to most fires. Thermite reactions and lava pits might do the trick. I'm writing this down for future use. Don't dispose of bodies in fire. Got it. Adult store employee. Is that really a profession? Not really, no. But many of our toys are pretty much the same item in different packaging. A company will have different lines of toys that are really the same darn toys in different boxes. I'm a male massage therapist. If you get a stiff rod on my table and ask me to fix it, I'll deliver a quick chop or three to your upper inner thigh. It will reflexively disappear, and your berries will try to hide inside your pelvis. Fixed. It helps set the tone if some gross old man decides to press his chances. Hasn't happened in years, though. Athletes are refreshingly different from the general population. NASA intern. Most of the corrections to rocket blueprints are done in MS Paint. Chef. If you liked my first course, you'll usually get a larger dessert portion. Therapist. Most people get into the field as a result of their own personal struggles or messed up families. As a field, we're probably the most effed up. It's true, therapists aren't actually the perfect, stable people that a lot of us picture them to be. Most of them are just as messed up as the rest of us and have the training and emotional distance from their clients to be objective and help find and solve the problem. Advertising copywriter. There's very little manipulation or psychology involved. 99% of the time, it's just guys in a room talking about funny crap and then writing it down. Then, the account people retroactively justify to the client why it makes sense with a bunch of fancy science. But believe me, there's very little "this will trick them" going on in the writing room. Recruitment. Racism and ageism is a hell of a lot more prevalent than you'd believe. Your credit score affects insurance premiums. You know those fancy defense lawyers or public defenders you hire? Yeah, the DA knows them better than you do. When you aren't in the room, they'll tell jokes, and those jokes are about you. As a defense lawyer, I can say that this is somewhat true, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing the best we can for you. Sometimes that camaraderie can help you get a better deal. Lawyers, in my experience, are like athletes. Off the court, we may be friends, but when we get down to business, it's a nothing personal, no holds barred, free-for-all. Aerospace engineer. Every aircraft you've ever flown in has hundreds of cracks, dents, and just plain broken parts, even if it's brand new. On the plus side, we do design for that. A crack can grow to 3 feet on a 737 between inspections before it becomes a serious problem. For a good example of aerospace fail-safe design, see the recent Southwest 737 incident. It's a perfect example of how we design crack propagation to stop before it endangers the aircraft. Computer programmer. We were never actually trained on how to make your printer work. IT technician. There's a 75% chance I used Google to solve your problems. If only you knew how to do it yourself, you could have saved yourself $100. Alright, I'm a little late to this party, but I'm a radio DJ and I just want to shout this so everyone knows. People actually freaking love Nickelback. We get maybe 2 to 3 calls a day asking for some obscure cover some indie band did, and the rest are just all requests for that crap you complain about hearing too often. Listeners absolutely cannot get enough Nickelback, Linkin Park, Green Day, and others. It's mind-boggling. The reason Photograph is on the radio so gosh darn much is because people keep requesting it. It's not my fault. What surprised you about your richer or poorer spouse's way of life? Making financial decisions based around the 3-paycheck month. If you're paid every 2 weeks, most months you get 2 paychecks. All of your monthly bills and budgeting is based on those 2 paychecks. But twice a year there are 3 paydays a month, and that's when you can actually solve problems. That's when you can get the car registered or fix the dryer or get the cat spayed. The other 10 months you're doing maintenance and trying to scrape by. 3 paycheck months, you can actually try to fix problems. I was the poor one. My husband, at the time still boyfriend, took me out to a very nice restaurant. The waiter asked if I wanted pepper on my Caesar salad that was just made tableside. I said sure, and he goes about it. The thing is, I didn't know you had to say stop. My husband slowly realizes this, but decides to see it play out. He did eventually say that I needed to say stop. I just thought a Caesar was had this way, as it was the first time of mine even eating a salad that wasn't just iceberg and ranch dressing. It still tasted fine, just a little bit too much pepper. I was adopted at age 7. I lived in extreme poverty, and then all of a sudden I lived with a doctor who bought gifts for birthdays and Christmas. I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know you could go to the store to get food. I just thought you went to the church and had to pray before they gave you a bag of food. When the family had people over for dinner, if they ended the prayer before the meal with FHB Amen, it was a signal to let the children know that they don't have enough food for everyone, so take smaller servings and let the guests get a regular serving. FHB equals family hold back. They were always generous to their friends and didn't let their lack of funds embarrass themselves when doing so. I was just thinking the same thing. My family was considered antisocial. It wasn't because we didn't like socializing or going to events, it's because we couldn't even afford to, and if mom and dad organized dinners, they planned months beforehand and scraped every cent together to pay for it. My ex was stunned when I told her I've only ever had one birthday party, 21st, because mom and dad had no money.
Hi. Yeah, rich people who want to marry someone significantly poorer. Hello, it's me. Hi.
Sorry to the last author, I'm not sure your method is going to be helped out much here. I just thought I'd spread your industrious gold digging to YouTube as well as in the forum it was originally posted in.
Honestly, food insecurity. When we were first married, she would get visibly uneasy if the food in the house was running low. She'd never overeat or anything, she was just always concerned about it. A lot of times when she was younger, she went hungry. On the humorous side though, she hates camping. Her answer is always the same. I camped because it was fun, and she camped because they couldn't afford hotels.
For me, my love of camping started from growing up poor. The only family vacations my single mum and brother and I had were family reunions several states away. It involved long road trips in a crappy car with no AC, but we got to camp in tents and get a break away from reality. We also ate a lot better over a campfire than me making hamburger helper for my brother while my mum went to bed early. She worked hard to support us and battled with depression untreated for years until she could afford medication. Those trips were good for all of us. She and her mother lived with her grandfather to not be homeless because her grandfather owned a house. She was putting community college payments on her credit card and building debt with it. I paid off her credit cards when we were dating and she cried from me being so nice. It was only like $1,300. I bought a condo and we got married, then we bought a house. I never really considered myself rich until I started dating her and learned that a trip to Wendy's was a treat. I grew up middle class and we're currently middle class now. I get giddy with excitement after grocery shopping trips. It just feels so good to even have enough food. Though I still have to constantly remind myself that I'm allowed to eat if I'm hungry, I'm a grown-up. I bought it. That and snacks. We were never allowed to snack between meals and never bought anything extra that wasn't absolutely necessary. My husband had to teach me, you buy something tasty that you don't actually need, and then you can just sit and eat it whenever you feel like it. Amazing. I still don't really do it, but it's nice to know that I can. My wife was born and raised in the Soviet Union. She still goes crazy for fresh fruit like it's the most extravagant luxury. The prevailing mindset in my husband's community growing up was that insurance was something only rich people had. Not health insurance, mind you. Well, not just health insurance. Auto insurance. Going without it was a way of life for most everyone he knew. My significant other has to constantly remind me that I can go to the doctor whenever I need to, instead of just hoping I don't die. Sandwiches. When I made him a sandwich, I only put one thin slice of meat in it. He couldn't believe that was how I had sandwiches growing up. Growing up, we weren't allowed to just eat deli slices. It had to go between two pieces of bread because that would fill you up faster and save on meat costs. I'm not well off, but my stepfather is. I was raised by a single mum who spent money on everything, and bills were always behind. She just couldn't manage her money at all. In her 50s, she met and married a multi-millionaire. We're in Middle America, so that goes further than maybe in a lot of areas. They've given themselves $10,000 a month budget to live on, living on interest. They own their own home. Anyway, once my mum met him and they all got their finance situated and paid off, she won't spend a penny. He spends like it's going out of style. He's actually begged me to take her shopping to get clothes and accessories. She won't do it. She spent more when she was a single mum with nothing. It makes no sense to me, at least buy a new outfit. She's hell-bent not to use a penny of his money. They barely even have any groceries. If they have anything, it's because he buys it for them. She's a retired nurse that gets a retirement and social security, but she won't spend anything. She lives poorer now than at any other time in her life. This sounds less like a financial issue and more like she's trying to preserve her pride. She knows that people will think she's a gold digger if she spends his money, so she's going to the opposite extreme and refusing to benefit from any of it. Absolutely. Sounds like she doesn't want to come off as a gold digger who spends her husband's money. But also, she may have realized that she doesn't really need to spend much money anymore if basics are covered and she doesn't have young kids. My mum spends very little money, as does my dad. They have money, but they've always been brought up frugal. I realized that the biggest expense has always been us kids. Piano lessons for us, trips for us to see grandparents, dinner if it's our birthdays, toys every so often. Now they don't have to spend on that stuff. They occasionally eat out, they travel a bit, but usually that's paid for by my dad's company. So they just don't spend much. They don't enjoy spending in and of itself, and they just spent money in the past to take care of the family. I didn't marry this woman, but when we started dating, she always just wanted to chill at my place, never hers, which was fine, but she gained 35 pounds in just like a few months of dating. She was 100 pounds when we started dating. Not that it was a bad thing. 1, I'm a chubby man, and 2, I was just glad she wasn't preggers. Anyway, turns out her family couldn't afford dinner sometimes, so suddenly she had a place to eat every night and gorged herself. I know 2 siblings who were starved by their dad for years until CPS took them away and placed them with their biological mother. From there, they gained at least 100 pounds respectively and will not stop gorging themselves on food. At first I didn't understand, but now that I'm older, I know. Food scarcity is traumatizing.
I fell in love with my uni best friend who really didn't have any money. When I got a job for my birthday, I decided to plan a holiday and offered to bring him along. He doesn't know I'm in love with him at all, but maybe I should tell him.
Well, this is a bold move. I just hope he's not the kind to get insecure about a woman paying the lion's share of that sort of thing. My partner and I are both poor, but different kinds of poor. She's never been homeless or not had enough to eat, while I have. She's extremely frugal and hates buying anything we don't need. I feel a desperate need to stock up if we have any extra money, and it's a fight for me not to fill our house with canned and dry goods in case we don't have enough money to buy food next month for some reason. It makes no sense, but my instinct is to hoard food because there was just never enough of it around growing up. I'm not rich at all, but my husband came from a very poor Mexican village. He told me he used to shower outside because there was no in-house plumbing and use leaves as toilet paper. I mean, there's poor and there's my husband's previous life poor. He's been living in the US for 12 years now, but when we first met it was so interesting seeing life through his childlike eyes. Going to the cinema was a huge event for him. Heating food up in a microwave was a totally foreign concept, and staying at fancy hotels when we went on vacation was like, whoa! I still see him surprised by things now and then, and it just reminds me how much I take my middle status class for granted. Mexican here. You'd be surprised at how common that really is. In Tantoyuca, there's a hill called Hollywood, where there's no plumbing and no government help. There are women there who make tamales and other large numbered meals for every kid in the neighborhood because their parents can't feed them and we don't abandon our own. Also, it's very common to be shocked by things like fancy hotels because ours are nice, sure, but there's no rich gringo nice and it always appalls me on the TV.
Hamburger helper. She hates it because it would be her meal 5 times a week growing up. I'd never seen Hamburger Helper before I went to college, and I love that stuff. 10 for $10 deals are awesome. My foster daughter was the same way with pasta. She ate so much of it before we got her that she hated it. The first meal I made her on her first night with us? Pasta. She didn't say a word and ate her dinner, but later I found out she didn't like pasta because of how much of it she had eaten before. I always took her grocery shopping so she could pick out stuff she liked after that. She was shocked when she found out red delicious apples weren't the only variety out there. I think she overdosed on Honey Crisp apples when I first introduced them to her. My significant other said, "Today I made rent," meaning today I've earned enough or accumulated enough to pay the rent, and I realized that this is a monthly accomplishment to someone with no fixed income or salary. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One of my exes could pull in a lot of money, easily twice or thrice what I could. He was so incredibly bad at saving this money, down to, say, setting himself up as a company to avoid paying higher rate of tax, but then paying a large amount each month to an accounting company to handle his taxes, which he'd do himself anyway because he didn't trust them to get it right. He'd pay for taxis from one end of the city to the other, or hire cars rather than use public transport. Flights cancelled? Book new ones. Never even bother to claim back on insurance. Buy a sports car? Wreck it? Sell it for scrap. He'd work contracts and then take time off work on his own startup, but spend every weekend just going out and buying substances and booze. Haha, money really means nothing to you, huh? But then when we became a long-term couple, I started to feel like his mother. Man, will you not just fill out the insurance paperwork? I had an ex that must have made 6 figures as a specialty electrician of some sort, but legitimately had no clue how much, because his work would pay for things for him. I have no idea how it all worked out, but his work paid for all of his lodging and reoccurring bills, cable, utilities, weekly maid service, so he had no idea how much any of that stuff costed. Even after that, he ate out, drank, and smoked constantly, had multiple state-of-the-art entertainment systems, played hockey, had Yankees season tickets, 10K plus, and kept envelopes of cash from cashed paychecks around his house. I asked once how he does his taxes. The company handled it. Oh, and he had multiple DUIs where he or the company paid for a lawyer and then did at least one of those rehab programs where you're monitored and substance tested constantly. I can't imagine any of that was cheap. My husband grew up in a family where they were comfortable but on a strict budget. 6 kids and mum on disability. My family had no budget. One day we were at the grocery store and he always insists on walking up and down every aisle. I finally lost it because he was taking so long and asked him why he did it. Growing up, we could only spend $100 a week on groceries for all of us. I always had to put what I wanted back because I couldn't afford it. Now I can afford whatever I like, so I just like to look at everything I could have. Took him 10 years to tell me this. I felt like a terrible person. I've had a few people write in that $100 a week is a huge budget, and how is that a stretch? We live in a city with an extremely high cost of living. It's in the top 30 in the world. Getting a family of 4 fed for that much weekly would be a huge stretch here, and his family did an amazing job. Not rich per se, but with a partner who was raised by a teen mom and grew up poor. Sometimes I just want rice and vegetables for dinner, and that's a no from her. She won't go back to that life. My dad was the opposite. Grew up poor and built a business up and ended up doing quite well. He still eats like there's only 25 cents in his checking account. Left alone, he would gladly eat ramen every day, and his go-to meal is rice porridge. We went to Osteria Francescana in Modena a few years ago, literally named the best restaurant in the world. We all went for the tasting menu, but he asked to order a la carte. And he wanted to order buttered fettuccine. He only agreed to the tasting menu when they insisted that the whole table had to do it if some of us were doing it. He'll even insist on eating things that have been burnt or drink milk that's just starting to turn. I was with a girl for a while who grew up in a pretty broken home. Still surprises me just how bad her spending habits are. She racks up credit card debt like it's nothing. She lived in the desert without air conditioning. The narrator would dearly love some context here. Did she grow up in the desert? Or was she choosing to live out there when there were better options available to save on cost of living? We've been long-term dating. She comes from a lower-income family than me. Pets. I was always surprised by the number of pets she and her family had living in the trailer and how much of a share of their income they spent on them. My dad is a successful business owner now with several houses and multiple sources of income. But he grew up dirt poor when he had parents and became even poorer when he was out on his own at 14. Think sleeping on the floor of a gas station men's room poor. To this day, he'll take a small handful of cereal out of his bowl before he pours milk in and put it back in the box, so he'll always have some cereal for later. Over 40 years later, and the pain and worry of growing up poor without luxuries like breakfast cereal will still affect him. Growing up without money does crappy things to people. Credit cards were avoided. For me growing up, we were encouraged to get a credit card in our name and use it as much as possible in order to build credit. There was always money to pay it off each month, so it made sense to 1. Build credit and 2. Collect airline miles or whatever the reward was back in the day. When we got together, she always used cash or debit card. She had a credit card for emergencies and avoided using it otherwise. It took a long time to get her over her aversion and skepticism. We were fortunate enough to have 2 good-paying jobs, though it also taught me a healthy appreciation for what it means to have a financial cushion. I dated a 1%er briefly. She was surprised I willingly went inside fast food restaurants. Since people are saying 1% is still a huge range of income, I just looked up her dad and he pulls in over $10 million a year. I'm not dating her, but she's a good friend of mine and her parents are definitely 1%ers. I told her I had to work this summer to save up for graduation, and that money was going to be tight for the next year, but I'd love to go on a safari after graduation if I managed to save enough. Mind you, I'm solidly upper middle class. Her parents paid for it just because I'd helped her move into her apartment. It's not like that's what friends are for or anything. It's hard to see it this way, but paying for your trip was not a hardship for them. It was a small blip that was a nice thing to do for a friend, just like helping your friend move was a blip for you. I'm from a middle-class family, but my wife's parents are near billionaires, 0.001%. She was shocked about many things. 1. That I considered the cost of food and groceries at all. They'll go to gourmet food stores and spend over $1,000 and say things like, well, it's for food. We're ingesting this stuff, it should be the best. 2. Booking non-first-class airfare on any long trip would be considered cruel and unusual punishment to her. 3. No concerns about utilities, insurance premiums, no comparison shopping on routine things at all. 4. Every vacation is the finest you can imagine, oftentimes bordering on ridiculous, having so many upsells on packages and bespoke items that it's just wasteful. 5. No concept of debt and understanding of how normal people live. 6. My wife was shocked when I save things that get wet or muddy. She would just want to throw things like clothes and fine items in the trash away when they were just lightly bruised. We're very much in love and have shown each other a lot. She enjoys hanging with my salt-of-the-earth mum more than her own family at this point. I like being spoiled here and there as well. It's a great mix. Now I've adopted her standard of living. We met in medical school. She did a decent job of hiding her privilege there. Our relationship grew out of our shared sense of humor and, of course, physical attraction. Not super rich by any means, but my husband said he'll always be surprised by the following: how I lived off $13K in 2011, resiliency to survive financially and pursue my dreams of being the first college graduate in my family, how I didn't know what spinach was or tasted like until our first few dates, in addition to a lot of other leafy greens. First real date in my 20s, we went to a steakhouse. When the waiter asked how I wanted my steak, I said cooked. Ha! Yikes. Didn't know there was any other way than how my dad cooked steaks. Cheap flat steaks topped with ketchup or ranch dressing. I was the poor one. It absolutely floored me how my wife acts when something broke like a car, appliance, clothes, etc. As a child living below the poverty line, replacing a tire or other necessities was a disaster, requiring tricky trade-offs in the budget or just plain acceptance of how boned you were. When my wife's phone broke, I went into full panic mode while she just shrugged and said, "We can just get a new one this afternoon." And then we did. I'm normally a Picasso, MacGyver of the duct tape and trash bag world. This skill helped me break into IT. Sadly, the phone was beyond repair. Trust me, if I could have fixed it, I would have. In my case, I'm from the wealthy family and my partner grew up poor. A couple of months ago, our new TV from a big box store broke suddenly. He bought the warranty, which I never do, I didn't think they worked, and he spent like 5 hours on the phone over 3 days and got us a replacement TV, which is not something I would have done or thought of doing, which makes me sound so spoiled, but I learned something for sure. He was making good money but came from a poor family. One thing that surprised me was the lack of budgeting. No knowledge of 401k or Roth IRA. Retirement seemed like something that he'd never get to do. Even though he made good money, he was starting to rack up credit card debt. Now he's much better at it than I am. He adores budgeting and looks forward to financial independence and retiring early. I'm from the poorer family. Not super poor, but my in-laws have a stupid amount of money, so by comparison, I'm very poor. But I think I can answer for her. We have 2 young kids, and my wife was shocked when I said we should look for clothes and toys for them at a local flea market and garage sales. The idea never occurred to her that we could save money by getting some gently used items. She had never even been to a garage sale in her life. She's grown to love them and now questions whether it's worth to buy any item new or not before running to Amazon or a store. Her parents think it's disgusting we make our kids wear clothes that another child had before, but they don't pay my bills. She wouldn't waste any food ever. We went through a few rounds of her getting sick from eating month-old muffins and similar before I convinced her it was okay to toss old food and go shopping. My wife genuinely thought, and her family still does, that there's some direct relationship between someone's net worth and the labels they purchase. If someone doesn't have a Gucci bag or a Rolex watch, why, it's because they can't afford it. My wife was astonished when I first told her that people exist that are ultra-wealthy and yet drive old cars and wear clothes without labels. When did you realize that HR was definitely not your friend? Got pulled into a meeting with 2 HR reps in the middle of my shift. Taken to this really nice boardroom, which was confusing because I was just a grunt, and this is literally floors above where I should ever be. They sat me down and basically said, "What do you have to say for yourself?" Me, still confused, tells them I have no idea what they're talking about. Everyone was really quiet and serious, and I'm scared out of my mind. And they say, "You know what you did. This is cause for termination, blah blah blah." I'm literally thinking this is really excessive for being a few minutes late sometimes. I insist I don't know what's going on. One of them maybe realized something was wrong and flips open a file and says, "You're XX, right?" Turns out they got me mixed up with someone else who has the same name. On the elevator ride down by myself, I was still sweating. Don't know what that other person did, but man, HR does not play. Oh yeah, and nobody said sorry. I should add, this is Canada, where we have a special sorry law where saying sorry doesn't constitute admission of guilt because we all say it so much, so they totally could have apologized. I had the Air Force Office of Special Investigations do that crap to me back in like 2002 or so. I got told the OSI called and wanted me to go over to their office. I got interrogated for about 10 minutes, them accusing me of doing white snow and hanging out with some other guy I barely knew. After me arguing with them for those 10 minutes or so, they finally said, "Aren't you this airman?" He had a super common last name, and I was like, "Yeah, but there's multiple airmen with that last name in my shop alone." Yeah.
Turns out they meant a different person completely. They saw my last name and never checked my ID or asked my first name. I had to get right into the investigation because they messed up. I went to HR to report that my team's manager was illegally shorting all of our paychecks. HR's response was to adopt a new company-wide policy addressing the paycheck issue and backpaying most people for a certain amount, and also to frame me for work avoidance. HR and IT disabled part of my login account to a tool we used, and then fired me a few months later after failing to fix the problem and allowing me to actually do my job. They tried to deny my unemployment claim afterwards, told unemployment rep that they had logs showing that I did something to break the tool I don't even have access to break in the first place. They also didn't think to disable my email address in a timely manner, so I was able to back up all of my emails with IT documenting exactly what went down. Unemployment approved my claim and hit them with a major penalty to their insurance. This entire thread will likely hammer home something that I've said in an earlier video. HR is there to defend the company from unnecessary damage from its personnel. Whether the best way to do that is removing you or the person you have a grievance with is more important than any actual justice. I work in Sweden. I had a friend recruited to an identical position as mine. I had to tutor him for a year, given that I have more work-life experience for that gig. He came in earning €1,000 a month more than I did. When time came for salary discussions for me, I used this example and my manager tried to pass that along to at least align my salary. The HR partner responded that they didn't want to make that drastic raise because, and I quote, "there might come a time where he and me wouldn't do the same things as now, and if that happens, we can't downgrade his pay, and he would therefore be overpaid. This is because 2 other team members had been demoted and now make manager pay for less work. We do the same job, but they make double of what I do. I got a minor raise that year due to my boss asking the other team members to give up a small share of their annual raises to be able to align my salary. Quite insane that they actually had to do that. Still not anywhere close to being aligned. On Monday comes this year's salary discussion. The madness is to be continued. Delivery-wise, I perform better than they do. They're 10 and 20 years older than me. The friend I mentioned is 1 year younger than me. HR ordered me to downgrade my 3 excellent employee reviews to satisfactory because management didn't recognize their names. I got written up for telling my employees this. HR denied that they told me anything, even though I had the emails from them documenting it. Totally worth it. My employees were excellent and got the raises they deserved. I saw a similar situation. The company has a policy where 10% of the workers had to get bad performance reviews, which meant no raise for that year. What the company didn't take into account is that some teams are small and hyper-specialized. You can imagine what happened next. A bunch of crucial employees quit and that policy was cancelled, but the damage was already done. I fight this every year. Their argument is that part of the job should be going above and beyond the call of duty, so when people do a good job, that's technically satisfactory work, which warrants the same merit increase as everyone else. When I ask what the metrics are for exemplary work, they straight up told me that executive leadership isn't allowing any exemplary ratings this year, and that generally nobody should be able to get an exemplary rating. My counter is that hard work should be rewarded to encourage further hard work, and ask if they want to send a message that the company is only willing to encourage the bare minimum. Yes, that's what we prefer. The 3-point scale should just be a 2-point scale, nobody should get a 3. Isn't that some crap? Co-worker accidentally backed his company truck into my personal car while it was parked. He alerted me and our local manager immediately. We took photos, filled out the incident report, yada yada yada. Everyone in our office was in agreement about what happened, that it was an honest accident and the company's insurance should cover the cost of fixing my car. Then the HR director got involved. First, he tried to get me to assume liability since it was my personal vehicle that caused the accident. My car was parked in the parking lot and I was inside at my desk when it happened. When I pointed this out, he backed down and said he would file the claim. Next, I got a call from a hostile insurance adjuster from my company's insurance demanding that I provide my insurance information or they'd be pursuing legal action. It turns out the HR director had filed the claim saying that I'd run into the parked work truck with my car and tried to flee the scene, but was witnessed by a coworker who reported me. I informed the adjuster what had actually happened and emailed her the photos and signed incident reports and witness statements that we'd filled out, and she changed her tune pretty quickly and said she'd get back to me. The next day, I get a settled agreement from HR asking me to accept $1,100 for repairs and to sign a form releasing the company from further responsibility. I'd only just dropped my car off at the body shop and hadn't even gotten the estimate back yet. I declined and was told that I either had to accept their offer or be out of luck. At this point, I reached out to my own insurance and told them what happened. As I went through the sequence of events, I could hear my agent getting almost giddy about the blatantly illegal tactics HR had tried on me. In the end, they processed my claim and pursued my own company's insurance through subrogation. He also mentioned that they would probably be seeking additional damages due to falsification of statements in the initial claim. You don't F with USAA. In the end, the damage ended up costing over $4,000 to fix, but I didn't have to pay a cent, not even my deductible. I don't know if the HR director experienced any consequences, but there was a comment in our finance VP's year-end report about needing to reduce extraneous costs due to reporting delays and inaccuracies in liability claims. The HR payroll manager at a small hospital I worked at had a bad habit of not paying the sign-on bonus that was paid out incrementally in 3 payments through the course of a year, and sign-on bonuses for picking up extra shifts. After repeated requests to be belatedly compensated, I took it to corporate, who addressed my issue immediately. A couple of weeks later, I was terminated on what amounted to a technicality where I forgot my badge one shift, and my relief was late to take over sitting with a patient, causing me to receive more points against me than if I'd called out for that shift. When I was called in to receive my notification, the director of nursing was shocked, but ultimately there wasn't much she could do. I'll revise my earlier statement. 90% of HR's job is controlling damage to the company. The other 10% is dishing out vengeance when they're brought to task for their evil behavior. Overall, I've been able to get along with HR departments with one exception. I was working a help desk job for a company during college, and the head of HR called in for help. He was making an Excel spreadsheet and couldn't figure out how to make a formula do what he wanted. I offered to come and take a look as we were in the same building, and he told me I couldn't because the spreadsheet was full of confidential information. So I asked then if he could describe exactly what he was trying to do without giving away any specific information, and he told me what he was trying to do was confidential. So I clarified that he wanted me to tell him how to do something, but I couldn't see it and he wouldn't even tell me what he was trying to do. At that point, he agreed that I wouldn't be able to assist him since he couldn't divulge anything. As soon as we hung up, he called my boss to complain that I was useless. That there is a top-tier Class A moron. You have my sympathy. They already said it was the head of HR. Calling him a Class A moron is redundant. HR hired consultants to run morale-building employee input sessions. Basically saying, we're not from the company. You can tell us all the things you don't like about working here and would like to see changed, and we'll put it all into a report from management. Don't worry, everything's anonymous. We just need material for our report, and you guys get to have your say in improving things around here. Turns out HR and the consultants recorded all the sessions and played the highlights for management. People were disciplined for criticizing the company or their immediate superiors, and any shred of faith or trust in management that the employees may have had was instantly incinerated. Managers now complain that they don't know what's going on in their teams because nobody tells them anything. I wonder why. I worked at a smallish company that grew big enough to hire an HR person. Her office was down from mine, so in the mornings I'd swing by and say hi. That turned into grabbing a cup of coffee together, then into having a pastry and talking about life. I found that if I mentioned someone's name in passing, a few minutes later she would spill the beans about that person's life. What work issues they had, health issues, family issues, and other things. I learned really quick any issues I had not to take them to her. She made it about 6 months before she got fired. Damn, this was like the HR supervisor of my former company. She didn't have any formal training in HR but still got the job because of connections. She'd tell anyone she was close to confidential details about certain employees like their health and family issues. She would also divulge information that only the management should know, like business negotiations, and it was all voluntarily done. Anyone with formal training who worked under her never lasted a year. Last I heard, they finally hired an HR manager she would report to. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I asked my boss for a desk phone with a speakerphone function because sometimes I need it at work to conference people on the phone with people in my office. We'd had these old yellow phones, so he told me to make a request to him and CC our office manager, and he'd send it to the HR department of our region via email. So I put forth a nice email outlining what I'm requesting and why I need it for HR's request. My office manager replies all and asks HR, per his request, should I order the phone through the same channels I've used before, or is there a new policy? HR responded, completely livid. She demanded to know why I needed this phone, it was in the email, and then accused my office manager of going behind HR's back and ordering phones before without approval. My office manager told my boss, who called HR and chewed her out, and I could hear yelling. My boss came out of his office and yelled at me. See what you've caused? He was fired up, but I know he didn't mean anything maliciously by it. I just laughed. HR had to apologize to office manager for accusations. Turns out, after everyone yelled their fricking lungs out for an hour, the speakerphone I needed was literally free and we had boxes of them in storage. I had it for a month before HR rolled out fancy new phones that were actually expensive and convoluted, requiring training to set up and use. At the company picnic, we had to wear fricking name tags, and I'd never met HR lady face to face, and she came up to me and said, "Oh, haven't we met? What's your name?" And I was trying to hide my name tag, but she read it and didn't seem happy to see me. I never understood why HR had to okay the purchases at my old company too. My coworker ordered stuff for our department, and one of the few things she put down was Kleenex, which our boss said was fine because we were running low. HR sees it and sends a long email to both my coworker and boss saying we were wasting money and had to cancel the order because there were some in a storage cabinet. To be fair, none of us knew, and that cabinet was located outside our department room. Our boss looked through the purchases before ordering, but for some reason HR was always strict and wanted to know why we were purchasing certain things. "We need those binders for our project. What other reason would we buy them?" And my last real job before striking out on my own, I had an exit interview with the HR lady, who was actually just someone who was friends with the company president, who was filling in because the actual HR lady with a degree in HR and everything quit. A lot of people at this place quit, actually. It was a terrible place to work with out-of-touch management and delusions of grandeur limping along building websites for a business niche that was mostly old people who thought the internet was magic. During the exit interview, she asked why I was leaving. I told her I liked my coworkers a lot but hated the company. She got this exasperated look and got genuinely upset and told me she had been getting that same line from everyone else who quit and had their exit interview recently. It boggled my mind that they could hear the same thing over and over again from so many people putting in their time until they could go on to something better and not stop to think that they should change something. I mean, this might be the closest thing to an honest and decent HR rep that we've heard of in this thread so far. But it took someone not formally trained in HR to actually get it. HR person used her position to collect intel to get people she didn't like fired. Office survey. I put in some honest opinions of a member of my team. They were fair and honest criticisms of a system which was not working as designed. I had little contact with the system, but the whole thing seemed reasonable to me. I was in fact demoted for this, a position was created above me, and a colleague who was my equal was to be my manager. The position didn't exist before. This happened the same week my husband died, and the management felt like crap because of the timing. But still, on my return to work, I was basically called out for criticizing the same system in a whole company meeting, and it was explained how X system should and did work, and anyone who thought it didn't work was stupid. Cut to 2 years later. Person above me quits, partly because they're scared to tell company that anything has gone wrong because of how I was treated, and they have to promote me to that position because it now exists according to the rules and I'm the only one who can do it. Again, in a whole company meeting, they admit X system isn't working and we're having a consultation to find out why. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I had to leave the room before it turned into hysteria. One of our departments shut down at noon thanks to an HVAC issue. Building management needed to move cubicles and pull out a chunk of drop ceiling, so the manager took them all out to the bar for a team-building exercise. Everyone in the department arrived the next morning to a final notice in lieu of termination on their desk that cited drinking on the job and time theft. The manager had an extra special third for improper use of a company credit card. None of what they'd done was against company policy, so the manager's boss, a vice president, called HR and told them that whatever newbie had written them to back the heck off. HR instead forwarded over a brand new policy manual and told the VP to make sure all the write-ups were signed and returned by the end of the day. The VP goes up the chain to his boss, the CEO. The CEO hadn't even seen it before, let alone authorized it. HR doesn't want to back down even when the CEO calls them. Sure, he hadn't authorized it, but he had asked them to consider revamping it back in March. This was the glorious revamp. They'd gone back to square one and completely rewritten it. It's full of best practices, industry standard rules, and easy to understand language. Oh, and they'd been enforcing it since May, so it would probably be best for him to just sign off on it, and any concerns he found could be incorporated in a future revision. Yeah, no. The CEO didn't make it past the first page before finding a contract law violation. Page 3 had a federal labor law violation, page 4 would make the NLRB angry, and the section on PTO would get them sued 6 ways to Sunday. The head of the HR was asked to resign. When she refused, she was fired. Okay, this lady is a champion of the worst kind. Fires a whole department without approval, fights VP, fights the CEO, gets asked to resign, says F you, I'm staying, and then gets fired. No fear at any single point. After 4 years on the job, I was given a first and final warning for asking why the heck HR was behind a locked door and now dominated over half the first floor, filled with new furniture that was unused after 6 months. Meanwhile, my chair was taken by another employee and I was told to use the chair without padding. An executive from another department heard my complaint, stole one of the unused chairs from the HR expansion and gave it to me, explaining that if I'd done it, I'd have been fired. She did it, daring them to fire her. Good on the exec. After doing this entire thread, I'm beginning to feel like Michael Scott was completely justified in his mistreatment of Toby Flenderson in The Office. Obviously, there are probably HR reps who are fine, but if the only way to care for your employees is to fight the people who claim they look after them, broken system. Not HR, but heed my warning, don't type anything into your work computer that you wouldn't say directly to your company's HR person's face. I've seen people had cases built against them for poor work and ultimately fired for the crap they say over Skype. I work in a mobile environment and have a company-issued tablet, and I bring my own tablet to work too. Why? Because company stuff stays on a company tablet and personal stuff on my own tablet. I don't even check personal emails with my company tablet. It's like in TV shows when the company goes through company emails and they see all the crap people have said about them or management through company emails. I've seen enough comments on Reddit of that happening, and I always ask, who the frick talks shot about a company on company email? I worked in a warehouse that regularly concealed the shipping of dangerous goods to save money. This went on for years. As time went on, I bubbled up through the ranks and was eventually made manager of the warehouse. I outright refused to ship anything anywhere until we started to claim our dangerous goods shipments properly. Their solution? The boss started to sign his name instead. This went on for a few weeks until HR found out. They obviously knew how much trouble the president could have got into. So next time a shipment had to go out, they got the newest guy in the warehouse to start signing his name instead, claiming they were training him how to do paperwork, but the poor kid had no idea. So when the driver showed up to pick up his shipment, I told him that there were a bunch of dangerous substances concealed in the shipment. So he refused it and left. I got told later that my actions were damaging to the company image and it had to stop. I told HR exactly what was going on and how I would not be a part of it. Less than a week after that, I was removed from my position due to company restructuring and laid off. Some of the most crooked crap I've ever seen. My rough estimates ballpark the money they saved at about $250,000 per year. Scumbags, the whole family. I reported inappropriate advances to HR at a large international company when I was 21. They notified my harasser, an older VP, before I'd even made it back to my desk. I was fired a few days later despite an excellent performance review the week before he propositioned me. Upon giving 2 weeks' notice, I got this stupid rant about millennial snowflakes, how we can't take the stress of a real job, and how we think we're so important and unique. But in reality, the only thing that would happen is that they'd find another engineer to fill in for me, and things would be like I never existed. After the initial shock, I replied with, "You're absolutely correct. Me staying on or not is meaningless. Consider my resignation immediate from this moment. Please give me the paperwork to sign." A skilled nursing facility I worked at got bought out by another company. New management comes in and starts cracking the whip and basically doing everything they can to decrease morale. What happens is predictable. People that have been employed in the building for 20 years start quitting left and right. Patient ratios start going up while more work is required. They lose so much staff that they resort to using a medical staffing agency, and the place has about half the staff on payroll to actually function independently. That management team has all left, but the effects are still withstanding. HR was the boss's sister, and the boss was a narcissist. The sister and HR had very little actual life experience because they both came from a big pharma family and never had a sense of what working a real job was like. The boss could do no wrong in his sister's eyes, so complaining about anything just got you gaslit. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. During an exit interview with my last job, HR asked me where I was going to go next. HR, so what's the name of the company you're moving to next? I'm not really comfortable disclosing that. Are you sure? It would really help us out. I'd rather not say. It's company policy that you need to tell us. I said no, and if you continue further, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. They gave me the shocked Pikachu face. I told my old boss this after I left, and he was absolutely shocked. HR have no right to know anything about the next place you're moving to. It's literally none of their business, but they tried to press it out of me anyway. More than likely to call them up and talk crap about me. What was the scariest, creepiest, or most unsettling experience of your life? 15 years old. I'd just got home from work, so I went to my bedroom to change out of my work clothes and get ready for bed. I'm in the middle of undressing when I look to my bedroom window to catch my reflection, and I see a man's face. I drop to the floor and turn off the lights, scrambling to get dressed, still watching the window. The face is gone, but I'm still watching. Then, a freaking camera. No face, just a camera pointed at me sitting on the floor. I bolt from my room and tell my mum and brother. My brother went outside and our ladder from the backyard was just laying there, but nobody around. Couldn't sleep for a year after that, just stared at that window. Haven't thought about this in years until now. When I was around 16, my rapidly growing family finally moved from the house I'd spent my entire life in. As you'd expect, we spent a lot of time fondly remembering things we used to do in the house as we were packing everything up. At some point, I decided to go into the downstairs closet with a flashlight and read, something that I'd used to do when I was younger to get some peace and quiet. Now, this is one of those very deep closets that goes under the stairs. It went back about 8 feet and then had a left turn into a very low, maybe 3-foot high space. This space was largely occupied by a mountain of old blankets and stuffed animals. Of course, this is the most fluffy spot to sit in and read. About an hour in, I shift a little to get comfortable, and I hear a low, slow, warped, hoarse voice say, "You'll always make me happy." I flipped my crap, hit my head on the low ceiling, and practically broke the door down getting out. After hyperventilating and explaining to my family why there was no color left on my face, I went back to see what it was. It was my stuffed little bear from when I was 3 or 4 years old that I happened to lean on just right to press his belly. But when I pressed on his stomach again, though, nothing. That poor bear I hadn't played with since I was a toddler used the last of its power, used its dying breath to tell me I made it happy. You make me happy too, little bear, when you're not making me wet my pants. When I was a teen, I worked at a cable access studio and made mini-movies. My neighbors gave me their father's old video camera. They told me he never used it, but it didn't seem to work anymore and had a tape jammed in it. I fixed it up, and on the tape was hours of him driving around at night and filming people through their windows. There was nothing overly adult-rated on it, but there is something unsettling about seeing peeping Tom footage of a guy eating dinner with his family or over 20 minutes of some girls dancing around in their room. That is incredibly creepy, and I can't help but wonder if any of the footage was from the person from our first story. Probably not, but crazier internet coincidences have happened. I was watching scary movies and I got hungry, so I decided to go out for a late-night Taco Bell run. I lived alone at the time, so it was quite a shock as when I opened the door a hand was reaching in after me. I slammed the door on the offending arm and ran and grabbed a butcher knife. After closing all the blinds and sitting in the dark for an hour, I worked up the nerve to look outside. I was shocked to find a bunch of Chinese food menus for a new restaurant scattered all over the ground. My brother and I were probably about 7 and 5, respectively. We used to wake up every weekend and play computer games before my parents woke up. One day we turned on the computer and got an eerie message that was directed to us. It said, "Hello, Sam and James. This is your computer talking, and I am alive. Do not run and tell your parents. They cannot help you now." Turns out my dad had programmed the computer to say that upon starting. This was mid-90s. When I was about 7 to 8 years old, my family rented a house close to the beach for a week. The drive wasn't very long, but as an 8-year-old, by the time we got there, I really had to feed the porcelain stallion a brown bone. We pulled into the driveway and are met by a middle-aged woman who owned the house and showed us the place and told us about the town and what to do. My first instinct is to find the bathroom, so I ask and she tells me it's the second door on the right after the kitchen. Go inside and open the bathroom door to an older guy just standing there looking at me. I kinda duck my head down, say sorry, and went back outside. They noticed I was back pretty fast and I told them there was someone in the bathroom already. That's when it got weird. The lady looked at me confused and said there's no one else in the house. I explained that I definitely saw someone in the bathroom, and after searching the house we find no evidence of anyone else being in there. After a while, the lady told us her dad owned the house and lived there and recently passed away. She inherited the house and wasn't sure what to do with it, so she'd started renting it out. I'm pretty sure I saw her dad. This is the story of how a creepy encounter with a scary man at a harbor cafe saved me from something even more terrifying. It was in the autumn of 1994, and I was 19 years old. At the time, my dad had been working for almost 6 months abroad, and I was planning a surprise visit. My dad and I have always been close. I'm an only child, and my mother passed away from cancer when I was still a baby. So it was just my dad and I, a really tiny little family. But he made up for it by being the most awesome parent ever. Now that I wasn't a little kid anymore, I appreciated that more and more. I had booked the ticket and was ready to go. It was going to be great fun to surprise him with a visit. I had to take the ferry though and had just gotten my driving license and felt really unhappy about having to drive my little car on board the ferry and decided not to bring the car at all and just rent one once I got there. Having time to spend, I decided to have coffee at a nearby cafe, since I was early and they hadn't started telling people to go onto the ferry just yet. At the cafe, there were lots of truck drivers, and I soon realized I was the only woman there. One man, a 40-ish bloke with ice blue eyes and tattoos all over him, was eyeing me from across the room. Something about him made my skin crawl. I got up to leave, feeling suddenly very uncomfortable, and to my utter horror, he followed. What do I do now? I asked myself. This was before everyone owned a cell phone, I might add. I decided to try and look busy and maybe he'd leave me alone. So I pulled out my ticket and tried to look like I was reading it carefully when he suddenly snatched it from my hand and said, "I'm on the same boat. I'll have hours of your company then. How lovely." In a voice that was an absurd combination of jovial flattery and hidden hostility. I felt very strongly that if I got on the boat with this man who now knew my booking details, I'd be in grave danger. I can't explain why the feeling was so overwhelming, but it was, and I decided then and there not to get on the boat. The ticket had been cheap anyway, I could get on the next one instead. I hid in the ladies' room until I knew the ferry had left, and then I went to rebook my ticket. The story could have ended there, a creepy encounter with a stalkerish man, but it doesn't. I was right in the assumption that getting on that ferry would have been unbelievably dangerous. Have you figured out the date yet? The date was September 28, 1994, and the name of the ship was the MS Estonia. And that cold night, she sank in the Baltic Sea, taking 852 people with her, resulting in the worst ferry catastrophe to strike Sweden to this day. I still recall that day with horror and wonder what would have happened if this creepy man had not taken an interest in me. If I'd not listened to my instinct and gotten on board, instead of waiting for the next boat. Would I have been among the survivors? Or would my dad have seen my name on the list of lives lost in the Baltic Sea? I worked at a movie theater selling concessions, and this older man approaches the counter and orders. I ask him, "Would you like anything else?" And he looks at me and says, "Every time I ask for the thing I want, they keep telling me it's illegal." I'm quite creeped out by this guy, so I just sort of chuckle, and then he proceeds to ask me, "Do you want to know what I ask?" Working in concessions, part of the job is making the moviegoers feel welcome, so I say, "Sure." And then what he says to me was the most disturbing thing I've ever heard. He says, "You wouldn't have any young girls in the back over there locked up for me," he said as he's pointing to the closet. He then continued, "Because that's all I really want, a young girl. I mean, I wish I could just bring them back here and you'd keep them locked up so I could just pick them up whenever I wanted. You know?" At this point, a line had already started forming up behind him and he'd still not paid yet, so I told him the total of his order and then he asked me, "You understand, right?" And I didn't know what to say, so I just chuckled and agreed. Then he pulled out a $10 bill and said, "I like you," and put it into the tip jar and walked away. Ugh. Not to me, but to my sister. She and her first husband had just had their first child a few months prior. My brother-in-law was working the graveyard shift at his job as my sister stayed home taking care of my nephew. Around 2 a.m. she heard loud knocking on her back door. She went to go check it out and saw a lady banging on the door asking for my sister to let her in. The lady told my sister that her husband had just beaten her down the street and was looking for her. My sister was hesitant to let her in since she had a newborn in the house and didn't want to interfere. She told the lady that the best she could do was call the police for her. The lady told my sister to not call the police and to let her in. This is where my sister got suspicious. She went to get her phone and called 911. When she went to the back door, the lady was gone. The police arrived a few minutes later and they told my sister that the same situation happened a few streets down. Apparently, the couple would do this act to get into people's homes. I'm sure this is very common, but having it almost happen to my sister and nephew just creeps me out. Some real Clockwork Orange crap. Thank God for your instincts on that one. The gormless narrator who can't say no to people would probably have let her in no matter how worried he was. Cop here. I've posted this story before, so it might sound familiar. I was dispatched to a house at about 1 a.m. for a prowler. We get there and talk to the residents. Long story short, they saw two people wearing masks, one Jason-style hockey mask and I don't remember the other. They'd seen them in the yard across the street. It was about 2 weeks past Halloween, so it seemed believable. We check the area and don't see anything. 10 to 8. It's worth noting the residents don't seem drunk or high or crazy at all. A few times you'll get a similar call and get there to find the resident is strung out on crystal and seeing things. However, back to the story. An hour later we get called back. This time we have our dispatcher on the phone with them while we're surrounding the area. We, about 5 of us, are in a perfect position and dispatch tells us they can see the prowlers in the next yard. We start to move in. Dispatch says the residents saw the two prowlers wave and move into the shed. Guess where I am? That's right, next to the shed. I give verbal commands, bang on the door, and nothing. Screw it, fine. I'll come in after you. Doors open and empty. I even think to check for a trapdoor. Nothing. It's raised about 4 inches, so there isn't even a possibility of a door leading out. Again, check the area and find nothing. I talked to the residents. They said as I was moving in on the shed, the two put their fingers to their lips, giving the shush sign, and then they both waved. They moved into the shed as I was next to it. We went over every possibility trying to come up with an explanation. If the caller was just messing with us, they had no prior history of it, as in repeated calls for service at the address. I'm not much of a believer in paranormal stuff, but I can still appreciate a situation where I can't logically explain what just happened. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One night about 10 months ago, there was a pretty heavy snowstorm in my area. All of the roads were closed and a curfew was issued for everyone except emergency medical personnel. I'd been shoveling snow for most of the day and was dead tired come nightfall. Didn't have energy to do much of anything besides eat dinner and lay down. I fire up some OG Star Trek and begin to doze off. A couple of hours later, around 1 a.m., I hear the sound of a door rattling and a slight whisper saying my name. I sit up a bit and realize it's coming from my parents' room, becoming fainter with the passing time. After 10 minutes or so, I gather up the courage to see what the heck is going on. Crappy folding knife in hand, I peek out into the hallway and I don't see anything. The noise is still coming from the room next door, the rattling becoming more rushed as I approach. Cautiously, I open the door and sneak inside. It's pitch black and I can't see anything. My eyes are taking entirely too long to adjust to the darkness. I'm shuffling forward and all of a sudden, something grabs and pulls on my leg. At this point, I was so freaked out I jumped back. As the whispers continued, I recognized my dad's voice. He was asking me for help. He had a stroke while walking to use the bathroom around 1 a.m. that night. After he fell, he was able to use his left foot to rattle a door to his bathroom. My mum fell asleep on the couch in the living room and wasn't around to help or hear. I was able to grab the house phone and call 911, and despite the weather, the police and an ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. That was the scariest night of my life. The doctors told us there wasn't much hope for my dad before going into surgery since he had had a hemorrhagic stroke and there was a massive amount of internal bleeding. Fast forward 10 months and my old man is cognitively the same, just paralyzed on his right side. He had every infection under the sun while in hospital, but he staved them off and is still with us today. He was my best friend before the incident and my hero after. In conclusion, heard some rattling and whispers, freaked out, found my dad lying on the ground after a massive stroke. I was visiting my hometown and decided to pick up my old high school friend from his house and take him to dinner and a drink to catch up. He's kind of stressed and tells me that his ex, with whom he'd broken up with over 2 years prior, has been stalking him and harassing him. I drove him home afterwards and it starts to drizzle. As I drop him off at his house, the neighborhood was dark and quiet by now, we both notice a bag tied to my side view mirror. It was likely attached when we were at the restaurant. We open it to see a poorly taken photo of a tree taken at night with a flash. There was a brief letter, obviously written from his ex, that said, "I buried our first love letter under this tree 3 years ago. This tree is growing from our love." I made sure my friend got into his house all right and got the heck out of there. When I was 16 in the mid-90s, aka the "I know everything, I'm invincible and you can't stop me" age, I got in a fight with an acquaintance while a whole bunch of us were hanging out at his house. Stupid fight, can't remember what it was about, but decided, screw it, I was going home. I lived about 5 miles away, but I didn't have a car, and since it was 2 a.m., there were no buses. I was going to walk home. In the middle of the night through a not as safe as it seems neighborhood as a tiny 16-year-old girl. So I did. I think in hindsight, my friends either didn't believe I was going to do it or were too startled by the sudden argument to realize what I was doing. I left the house and started hoofing it. About a mile out, the suburban housing neighborhood melted into a main street with highway access. I started to notice a grayish minivan following me. It would follow me, pass me, turn a corner, and about 3 blocks later, it would do the same thing. I mean, really obvious what it was doing. I crossed over to the other side of the street, so I was walking the opposite of the traffic flow, and thus no car could come up behind me. I kept doing it on the other side of the street. About a mile later, there was a 24-hour Fred Meyer, West Coast USA chain grocery and all-purpose night store. Its lights were bright, but parking lot empty-ish. I immediately crossed the parking lot and went to head inside. Just before I got to the doors, the minivan that had been following me pulled up into one of the parking spots. A guy called out from the driver's side and said, "I don't want you to walk over here, just stay there and listen. I just wanted to let you know what I was doing. I saw you walking a while back, but I also saw a dark car that was following you. A couple of times you went to turn around or stopped, so it started following you down a parallel side street. When I saw it, I started to follow you both just to make sure you were safe. Go inside the store and call someone to pick you up, please. I haven't seen the car since you headed across the lot." He waited until I was inside the store and then pulled away. I didn't have anyone to call, so I just let the night cashier know what was going on, and I hung out with her for about an hour and a half. Then I finished the walk home. I've never forgotten the incident, or that man, whoever he was. During the walk, I never saw the dark car he mentioned, but I've always been convinced he saved my life that night. I like to think that in this scary night there was a comical situation of the van driver and the dark car driver seeing each other, thinking the other car was shady, and being equally protective about the kid in question, until the dark car driver lost track of them. Not as scary as the others, but it creeped me out nonetheless. I was out of town on business, and my security camera went off in the middle of the night. I checked it and I saw a blurry white light moving erratically in my room. Now, I'm half asleep in the hotel hundreds of miles away from home, and I don't believe in ghosts, so my first thought was that someone was shining a flashlight into the house to case it. Not knowing what else to do and not wanting to call the police and look foolish, I used the two-way sound on the camera to yell, "Get the F away from my house, I'm calling the police." The moving light didn't seem to react to that, so I just sat there, in my hotel room, watching it until it stopped. The next night it happened again. And the next. I've shown the footage to my colleagues and they're convinced I have a ghost. I asked the pet sitter to look around the house for prints in the snow and they found nothing. I finally got home and nothing is out of place, but now I realize that I have to sleep in this house with the weird moving light. So when the sun went down, I was desperately trying to figure out what it was. 2 days later, I did. This is kind of hard to explain, but bear with me. This was a very bad winter, and I'd taken the internet's advice and thrown pantyhose filled with rock salt up into my gutters to prevent ice dams. The string hanging down from one of them had an ice crystal in it, so that little ice crystal was blowing in the breeze and reflecting the driveway lights back into the house. So, absolutely not creepy at all, but when you're away from home and see a floating orb in your house, it will give you the willies for sure. Back when I worked night shift as a security guard, I'd experienced mild hallucinations due to my poor sleep schedule. I was doing my patrol and I was feeling particularly out of it, so I kept getting those flashes of movement in the corner of my eye. But I was convinced it was just my brain messing up. At the site I was working, there's a large warehouse filled with chemical waste that has only one light on in it. As I'm going along, I see a pale shape on the ground and quickly recognize it as a body. My adrenaline spikes and I nearly pass out. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a CPR dummy the workers left out for training. I was sitting in our office room home alone when I was 19. I was typing a paper for one of my college classes. The office room used to be my sister's room before she moved out, so a lot of her decorations are still there. She had a photo of a mountain range, an oval-shaped mirror, and 3 different hangings that read Faith, Hope, and Love. This makes 5 total things hanging on the wall in the room. Suddenly I got random chills, which happens all the time, it was pretty cold there. But this time, as soon as I got the chills, everything in the room hanging on the walls fell off simultaneously. This really freaked me out, but it got a tiny bit worse. I got up and walked out of the room only to notice everything hanging on a wall in my house had fallen, besides the television in my room. All the pictures in the living room and the other rooms, all of the trophies in my room from Little League sports, and even a stand that held candles. I wasn't sure what to do. I picked up all the stuff and hung it back up, which actually took me around 15 to 20 minutes. Then I drove to campus to finish my paper. Never told my parents. It's also worth mentioning this happened around noon on a sunny day 3 winters ago. On our way to a camping trip, I passed by an old painted-up car with decorations of Muppets and stuff on it. Obviously owned by a crazy person who couldn't drive over 50 miles per hour. Without stopping, we then passed the same car 40 minutes later. I work for an engineering college and frequently have to go up to the industrial floor to find old projects and materials that had been stored years ago. This is the floor with the HVAC unit, steam pipes and stuff, and is not very well lit in the evening. The year before I'd started working there, it was discovered that a homeless man had broken in and had been living up there. The cops had to be called because he had some kind of mental instability and kept coming back. Fast forward 2 years later and I'm up there looking for some pressure gauges when I see one of the fluorescent lights begin to flicker. My attention is drawn to that area, where I see the silhouettes of a body laying on the floor in the most uncomfortable position, and another one crouched in the corner against the wall. I nearly crapped my pants before booking it in the other direction, but then the light came back on and I saw it was 2 test dummies that the mechanical engineers must have stored there recently. I keep a length of pipe with me every time I go up there now. What is the weirdest conversation a waiter overheard while serving a table? One day I was cleaning tables on the patio when I noticed these 2 men had spread cheap Parmesan cheese all over their table. I went over and asked very sweetly if I could clear it off for them. They shifted awkwardly and one of them asks, "This is for mosquito." No, this is cheese. They turn to each other and yell in unison, "It is cheese!" Turns out they were Danish and very nice, just confused. Last night was pizza and trivia night at the restaurant I serve at. I'm helping a couple in their mid to late 50s with pop culture questions, against restaurant policy. We were all laughing and having a great time when the wife leans over to her husband and says, "She's so cute, can I ask her to come home with us?" While I'm standing right there. I laughed it off and got a $40 tip on a $60 check, and their phone number. To keep those inquiring minds informed, no, I did not call them back. It's just not my thing. I'm in a committed relationship with a wonderful man, and jeopardizing what we have for $40 is dumb. They're regulars of mine, so Wednesdays should be interesting now. The wife was the really pushy one, too. Also, not Brad and Angelina. I overheard a man proposing a swinger lifestyle to his wife. She didn't like it one bit. And there I come to bring them their drinks in the middle of the conversation. "I can't believe you're going to lose your virginity tonight," said at a family table. I like to think they were all quick-witted and messing with me. "Maybe she just got married?" 2 adults, 2 kids, and the father said it. I really hope they were messing with me. I don't really remember the name used, but it went like this. "What's Jennifer up to?" "Oh, she's probably effing my husband." This was at a table of 5 women who looked to be in their 60s. The Golden Girls just don't give an F. I was closing late one night and had a couple of really high teenagers come in. They could barely sit up in the booth and ordered $80 worth of food for 2 people. One of the guys ordered an iced tea and asked for Splenda with it. I brought out his drink and set it on the table along with the sugar caddy. This kid just stared at it for a minute and then asked which packet was Splenda. I told him it was the yellow one. "Oh, what color is yellow?" he finally asked. I pulled a packet out of the caddy and handed it to him and walked away. I couldn't hold my laughter in anymore. As I was walking away, he turned to his friend and asked, "Can she tell how high I am?" They tipped me a quarter. I wonder if that means they tipped 25 cents or 25%. Honestly, it can go either way with people on Green Herb. More awkward and sad than weird, but it was a conversation between a man and his 10-year-old son. The man was berating his son over his golf game. I work at a country club, so this isn't exactly unheard of, but the dad was being super intense with his criticism. He was calling his son a quitter for wanting to stop playing, and telling him that if he quit now, he'd always quit everything in life. The kid sat there and listened numbly for about 10 minutes before I came over to refill their waters, and my presence causes the dad to pause in his speech. As I'm walking away, the kid says, "Evan doesn't make me play golf. He tells me to do what I think is good for me." The next time I'm on the floor, I see the dad is just heartbroken. I ask a coworker who had been there a few years what the situation is. Apparently the man and his wife were divorced and his wife remarried. He had his son on weekends and they'd golf together. The kid was apparently pretty good, but had developed other interests. I could be way off, but I see it as a father who was trying to connect with his son but being a bit heavy-handed at it. The thing that gets me is that the guy doesn't come in with his son anymore. He comes in alone and drinks a lot at our bar. He doesn't say so much. My stomach drops every time I see him. I make an effort to go over and see how he's doing, even if it isn't my station for the night. I'll ask him how his work is going since that's the only thing he's forthcoming about. He'll give me a brief summary, I'll listen and nod my head. There was a month or 2 where he came in with a very friendly woman, but that was a while back. I just want to hug the guy and give him some advice about his son, but I don't want to make it awkward. While I was working at a Jose's Crustacean Hut, I was serving a well-dressed, seemingly happy couple. They ordered a steam pot for 2 and a side of fries to share. Right after I drop off the food, before I'm even out of earshot, the husband confesses to having been cheating and that he wants a divorce. She starts bawling her eyes out to the point she's doing the whole gasping for air between sobs thing. And my manager immediately rushes over to try and see if it was something she could fix because a full restaurant on a Saturday night is not the place for a screaming, sobbing woman. In the end, the couple stayed for 3 hours, didn't touch any of the food, and just had me throw it all out. Very weird day. Is Jose's Crustacean Hut a bad fake name for Joe's Crab Shack? I am so ashamed that I accepted she worked for a chain called Jose's Crustacean Hut without thinking twice. I used to work at a bakery, bistro type of place, and one time there was this table of 4 or 5 brunchy ladies talking quietly to each other. I overheard one of them say something about a multi-party bedroom adventure, and another responded, also about this same encounter. I walked past their table again to try and overhear more, and realized they were talking about 4G. Not an well, you get the picture. Years ago, I was working in Pizza Hut in a not-so-great neighborhood outside of Atlanta. I was bringing a pizza to a table where I heard two kids who were no older than 7 in the middle of this conversation. Kid A said, "You best step down, B-word." Kid B said, "Try me. See you at Crossroads," and Kid A pointed his fingers like a gun at the other one. "No, see you at the Crossroads, mother effer." Then I asked them to sit down so I could serve the pizza. About 6 years ago, I was working at an Italian restaurant in California. A couple came in for lunch and ordered 2 iced teas and a 3-course special. Appetizer, entree, and dessert each. Maybe $25 total, the portions were smaller. After they down it, in about 25 minutes, the guy gets down on one knee and proposes to the lady. Keep in mind, this is like 11:45 on a Tuesday. She covers her face and the guy spends 20 minutes on one knee trying to convince her to say yes. It was the most uncomfortable thing that's ever happened to me. I had to go and drop off the check while the guy was still on his knee because he called me over. Anyway, they leave and come back in 2 months later and engaged, so it worked out, I guess. I was a waiter at a wedding once, and as I was serving the main course, I came up to a table where 2 guys were being introduced. The first one says to the second, "So, you swing, right?" The second guy says, "Yeah, you're with Kirsty, right? I effed her brains out while you were away for work." Guy number 1 shakes his head and says, "Thanks for looking after her so well," or something as I was walking away. I saw them later getting on like a house on fire. I wonder if the author means that these guys were just becoming really good friends or whether things were getting hot and heavy. Although I guess swingers aren't bisexual by default, so I guess I'll never know. I work in a local greasy spoon. There was a young couple in maybe their early 20s eating breakfast. At one point, the girl dumps a pharmacy's worth of pills on the table and starts sorting and counting them out. When I walked by to check on them, she started acting super paranoid, and as I walked away, I heard her say to the guy, "Maybe we shouldn't be doing this here. There's cameras." And she proceeded to move all of the pills back into her bag and they left. Got a really nice tip though. Something more humorous, I had a man in his 60s come in for lunch by himself. He was reading a book and I recognized the title. It was Fingersmith, which is a steampunk lesbian romance novel. Got a good laugh from that. I work as a cook in the most popular Thursday night bar at my school, but I also have a window for customers to order from and I chat with them quite a bit. Needless to say, almost all conversations verge on the side of weird. However, some take the cake. My favorite was 3 girls who came up to us to get some French fries, and while they were being made, they started to chat, mostly about boys. As the fries were being cooked, they included me in the conversation and tried to get my opinion on how to find the right guy and which guy they knew was the hottest. As the conversation progressed, one admitted that the only guy she wanted to F was one of the other girl's brothers. This became the facet of the discussion as she began to drunkenly go into details about how hot he was, why he was so hot, and why she wanted to F him. Meanwhile, the second girl stood there awkwardly with a look of shame on her face while her brother's attractive qualities were dissected by her 2 best friends. While not the weirdest story I have, it's definitely one that sticks in my brain. As an older brother, I really hope that if my sister was ever in this spot, she'd do the right thing and hook me up. I overheard, "I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think I'd save so much money if I just ate one big meal a day." "Yeah, but you're gonna get hungry later." "Yeah, I guess you're right." I'm pretty sure they were high.
This sounds like a conversation between the residents in Animal Crossing.
Oh, that explains it. Shep is always high as crap, dude.
I was working as a pizza delivery driver. Technically, that's waiting, right? And I pulled up to this house. Inside, you could hear 2 people arguing about something, and the woman yells, "F you, I'm gonna go and screw the next guy who says hello to me." She answers the door and I said, "Hello, here's your pizza." I unfortunately didn't do the deed with her, but she gave me a $20 tip, which was nice. We had a guy bring in his wife so he could tell her he wanted a divorce without her causing a scene because they were in public. When I went over to take their order, knowing full well how awkward this was, he said to her, "I'm honestly not that hungry. Do you want to split a sandwich?" To which she replied, "No, I don't want to split a fricking sandwich. You just said you wanted a divorce." And then they left. She had taken her heels off and was walking on the opposite side of the road. I once had a pimp try to encourage me to join his ring. This happened the other day at my restaurant. Not really weird, just a hilarious dad moment. The young kid said,
"I heard today that one of the members of One Direction left the band."
The dad said, "Does that now make them 2 Directions?" Classic dad joke right there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I noticed a kid from my school was sitting in a booth at the other side of the restaurant. I offered to trade sides with the other busser so I could go and say hi and such. The kid, by the way, is openly gay and very flamboyant at school. I started walking up and I heard his dad talking about how proud he was that his son just got a girlfriend. The kid noticed me and looked pretty embarrassed. I feel pretty bad for him and I hope his family is accepting of him no matter what if he eventually does tell them. I was serving two middle-aged ladies at a suburban Applebee's. I think they each had one drink at most. They're having a great time, clearly catching up. As I gather the plates after their meal, the woman motions me closer and whispers, "We're all made of stars." And she really did draw out that last word. I think she must have been on some sort of medication. Totally unexpected. A woman told me she'd just had a hysterectomy. I didn't know what to say. The only thing I could think of was, "Congratulations?"
I mean, I wouldn't just go whoring yourself out.
Yes, but it's glamorous. Absolutely serious conversation heard on the patio between four married women. I don't even know what was meant by what they said, and I'm still trying to figure it out. This woman ordered her food before her friends were there. Her friends came in 20 minutes later and ordered. She proceeded to demand free food because all of their food didn't come out at the same time. She gave my coworker, a 5-year vet at this restaurant with rave reviews, the hardest time ever. She was extremely rude. It was a birthday gathering. I overheard her saying she wasn't going to tip my coworker because the food she ordered was too expensive. When the other servers heard about what she said about the tip, we said, "All right, there's no tip anyway, so let's make it worth it." We went out to sing happy birthday. Her free ice cream was served, one scoop half melted in a bowl. We clapped out of time, all started the song at different times, and no one smiled. Most liberating night of my life. We rarely ever do stuff like that, so it was so worth it. This brings joy to this former waiter's heart. There are so many people I would have liked to pull crap like this on. Bless those of you with the courage to do it. I have two stories that I've been dying to tell. I work in a 4-star restaurant. I had a man come in for dinner, sweating bullets from the time he sat down. He and the lady were obviously a couple, and the entire staff guessed what would happen, especially after he ordered a $300 bottle of champagne to start the meal. She looked happy, but worried through the entire meal. When the dessert came, he got down on one knee and I heard her say, "Please don't." Those two words stopped my heart. I can't imagine what this poor guy was going through. They had a hushed conversation and she ran out, literally ran, while he sat there holding an open ring box. He finished the bottle of wine they'd ordered during dinner and pretty wasted turned to me and said, "Why won't she let me love her?" Just like that. Like I'm going to give him some kind of answer to explain the complex and painful thing that's just happened. I told him that sometimes we fall in love with the wrong people, and the only people worth anyone's time are the ones who give back what they get. He finished the bottle, paid his tab, and slowly walked to the parking garage. I never saw him again. I also used to wait tables at a Bob Evans that was located across the street from a nursing home. Whoever chose that location was a genius, because old people love the crap out of Bob Evans. I had an elderly couple who came in every day for lunch and ordered the same thing. It got to the point that they would have their meal on the table by the time I saw them crossing the street from the window. They usually only got applesauce and banana bread or mashed potatoes. One time the old man came in alone after a week of absence. He never said it, but I knew she had passed away. He still ordered for her and let the food sit on her side of the table, every day. I cried more than one time delivering it. I hope one day my future husband loves me that much. Before anyone asks, yes, this story really did happen to me. I'm a cook, really a chef, but I don't like the term, but one of my servers came back to the kitchen with a 1,000-yard stare on her face. I asked her what's wrong and she just says, 41, meaning booth 41. 41 is 2 tables from the kitchen. So I act like I'm making my rounds in the dining room and I get near 41. It's 2 nice mid-40s looking people dressed in business casual from what I can tell. The woman is drunk or high or both and passed out with a biscuit in her beer and smells like pee. A plate full of our most expensive dinner in front of her untouched. The guy with her smells like he crapped his pants and has never bathed. Mind you, they're clean-cut looking people. He's happily chewing away mouth open on crab legs, mashed potatoes and steak. He's slamming his beer and chomping away. I just give a smile and nod and keep on walking. I make it near the bathrooms, turn around and just watch them. He proceeds to poke her with a crab leg and says, "Can I have your butt when we get out of here?" She drunkenly mumbles what sounds like,
The fish and ferry won't fit up my butt. I looked behind me towards the kitchen and all of my cooks and quite a few servers are piled around the guard station, just holding back laughter and looking at me. I look at them and say I have no fricking idea what to do here. About 10 minutes later, he finishes his food. She wakes up, downs her beer with biscuit in it. They pay their tab with a 20% tip. I had to close that corner of the restaurant for the rest of the night because the fricking smell wouldn't leave that area from them. I even took the booth seats out back as soon as they left. Their stink somehow soaked into the wood of the booth and lingered in my restaurant well past closing time. I made my cooks stand around the booth and smoke after closing, in hopes that the cigarette smoke would smell better than they did. Hearing a woman talk about how bad her hoo-ha smelled at an Applebee's trumps any other conversation ever. I wait tables in an assisted living home, an old folks' home, and have one table filled with men with dementia that have the same one or two conversations every day. First they introduce themselves, then they either talk about how one of them had a cousin who was his age and was more or less a brother to them, or about how the union saved everything. We used to work for $1 a day, and it was hard work too. We'd still be doing it today if it weren't for the union, and if you didn't join, you were called a scab and they'd burn down your house or car. Those were the days. I've waited Chinese food for 5 years now. At the first restaurant I worked at, I heard a table of old women talking about how one of them was going to kill their husbands and what she was going to do with the insurance money. I stopped by to fill waters and asked what the talk of the day was. Weather, according to them. In hindsight, I should have said something, but I was 15 and scared shirtless. Most recently, a guy in his early 20s was having lunch with his grandparents, and as I go to drop off the check, he gets all upset and says to the grandma, "I shower 3 times a week now, jeez." The same day at the bar, I heard a girl end her story with, "And that's how I learned what midget tossing was." My favorite was a few years ago, and it was a brother and sister in their 70s. I'd waited on them before. They always sit in the same spot, away from people and near the kitchen. I come out of the kitchen and turn the corner, and the lady is giving her brother the bird, screaming, "Frick you, Morty, I should have smothered you when I had the chance." I mean, that just sounds like another day in Sibling Town, to be honest. I know very close families who have no filter around each other, and it's glorious. I was working late night on a slow Thursday at the local pizza shop as a driver. Man comes in to look at the menu board and asked me if his wife could use our bathroom. The place was takeout and delivery only, so we didn't have public bathrooms. I got the okay from my manager, and the guy motioned through the window for her to come in. The manager shows her to the back, and the guy says he doesn't see anything they want, so he's going to wait in the car. When my manager comes out, she says the woman is not okay and is incoherent. When we looked out of the window, the guy was hauling tail out of the lot. He had picked up a mentally challenged girl, entertained her for the evening, and then dropped her off. We called the cops and they took her to a shelter. Creepy and sad. I once overheard a mother tell her 12-year-old daughter, I'm guessing on the age but she looked fairly young, that she was not planned. I walked by just in time to hear her say, "Oh, don't worry, honey. Even though you're an accident, you're a well-loved accident." The girl looked at her mum with the saddest look on her face and burst into tears. I work as a host. Last night I had a middle-aged couple come in. I ask if it will be for 2, and the gentleman tells me they need a table for 3. The woman he's with immediately shoots him a confused look. I ask for the name of the guest joining them so we can show her to the table later. He says, Christine. She takes a deep sigh and says, "Really? She's coming?" To which he replies, "Well, she was invited," in a tone that suggests he wasn't a big fan of Christine either. Fast forward 15 minutes, and a nice middle-aged woman comes up to the host stand and says she's looking for her husband and his co-worker. Of course, she tells me she's Christine. Not a single one of them looked comfortable for that entire dinner. I'm a current indebted servant of Olive Garden. Some of the weirdest conversations I hear are about myself. "She's so young. Do you think she has kids to support? Why isn't she in school right now? I mean, it's Olive Garden and not an adult club. She has to be wearing colored contacts. Green eyes aren't real." I get elderly men who tell me they're lonely and ask if I will take them home just for the night. One man told me it was his 94th birthday, and when I asked if there was anything special I could do for him, he said, "Yeah, you can sit on my face." I almost got fired that day. I get really entitled high school girls who try to quietly talk crap about me being just a waitress and a total loser in life all the time. But the all-time weirdest was when I walked up to 2 high, and I mean completely toasted college students discussing aliens. "They could be one of us. How do you think we can do organ transplants? That's not natural. We can't grow organs, so where do we get them?" Illegal aliens, man. They land here, but they're just like us. so we take their livers.
What is the weirdest thing you found at the bottom of an elevator shaft? I once accidentally lost my driver's license down the little gap in the elevator doors. I just dropped it and was super unlucky as it slipped through. It turned up in my mail 10 years later. Obviously long expired, but still crazy that some maintenance guy found it and bothered returning it. Pest control tech here. Snakes had gotten into the pit and were climbing up and dropping down on people as they rode the elevator. Good times. Snakes on an Elevator, the sequel to the Samuel L. Jackson movie.
Worked at a hotel, guests dropped their phone down the shaft. After a few failed retrieval efforts, we called the elevator guys. They went down and got the phone and also found a carton of eggs. Rotten, but not cracked. I don't even understand how that could happen, actually.
Because it was no accident. I work in tech now, but while I was in college, I helped an HVAC guy, and he had once had me put a carton of fresh eggs in the duct of a client's office that had stiffed him before. When I asked him why he was doing this, he said, "If this mother effer doesn't pay up, he's going to have a new issue." But then the guy paid 2 days later, and I was sent to retrieve the eggs. He called it his 99-cent insurance policy. We found well over 1,500 tax returns at the bottom of the ATO's North Brisbane office elevator shaft.
Oh my frickin' god, I know who dropped those. Like, exactly who. A person I know told us a story about how they used to work in the ATO Brisbane office, and if anything came across their desk that was too hard, it was dropped into the bottom of the elevator shaft. We were only talking about it the other night, having a giggle about what would happen if they were ever found. They giggled, saying a crap load of files went missing in that shaft. This was way back in the day, like 25 plus years ago, before computers and well before the internet. If something needed to be sent out, they'd have to fill in a form by hand, and then that was typed up by another person on a typewriter and then sent out in a letter. So it was easy to make paperwork disappear.
I feel like 1,500 individual tax returns for a company would account for an awful lot of money. The author who replied to that must feel pretty confident nobody will care enough anymore. My dad was an elevator mechanic for about 15 years. He had a very dark sense of humor and would come home with some of the craziest stories. For example, anytime he was in an elevator, he would shake it a little or tap on the displays or buttons and go, "Yep, total piece of crap, inferior piece of crap." And I think he mostly just did it to freak people out. One of my favorites, he got a call that someone was hearing weird noises from the elevator. He got inside and rode the elevator up, and sure enough, he could hear it too. For half a second, he thought it was a baby crying and realized it was a cat. When he got to a certain floor, he could hear this sad meowing. It obviously wasn't in the elevator car, so he got into the shaft and found this little orange kitty. It had somehow, and I don't think he figured it out or told us, got into the elevator shaft and was sitting in a spot between floors where it wouldn't get crushed by the elevator, but it couldn't get out. My dad saved it and gave it to the building manager to see if it belonged to anyone in the building. It was the one time he ever told us a story that involved him saving an animal instead of finding dead ones. Cats are made of liquid, I'm pretty serious about that. They have a lot of floof and fit through cracks and crevices much smaller than you think should be possible. My dad supervises elevator mechanics, and one of them called him from a mental hospital and said, "You've got to see this." The maintenance guy was called because the elevator wasn't quite sitting level on the ground floor. It was about half an inch too high, and both patients and staff had been tripping on it. But all other floors were no problem. My dad arrived to find the maintenance guy cackling and looking into the bottom of the shaft. There were probably tens of thousands of magazines down there. They had to get a bunch of shovels, a small crew, and a rolling dumpster to clear it out. When it was all done, my dad decided to stay behind and pretend to read a newspaper while he sat in the lobby. After about half an hour, he sees an elderly patient holding a magazine, shuffling slowly toward the elevator. He stops in front of the doors, glances left, glances right, and quickly stoops down and slides the magazine into the gap, and shovels away as fast as he can with a huge grin on his face. My dad couldn't help but laugh hysterically. This guy had probably been sliding magazines in there multiple times per day, every day for decades. I should ask him whether he reported it or let the guy have his fun. It wouldn't surprise me if my dad went with the latter. As a psychiatrist, I've become fairly desensitized to weird patient actions, but I appreciate this story for how long this patient was doing this. Usually the passive-aggressive stuff goes away quickly, but this man sounds resilient as frick. Imagine what he could have done without getting served a bad genetic hand. Our medical team dropped a steel butthole dilator down the dumbwaiter shaft by mistake. When the technician came and grabbed it off the floor, I'll never forget the look on his face when I told him, "We need that up here, it's got to go in someone's butt soon." It was priceless. I'm a technician for a hospital dealing with rectal surgical tools. It's very normal. That poor dilator. It got away for a minute. Thought it was finally leaving that wretched life behind. Next thing it knows, it's lying at the bottom of a filthy dumbwaiter shaft. And just when it's starting to get used to that, thinking, not much of a view, but a lot roomier than I'm used to, along comes the elevator tech and it's back to the old day in, day out. It must have really done something bad in a previous life. I bet it was Roy Cohn. We found a couch. Not joking, it was a walk-in pit that a homeless person had retrofit into a small living room. One of my baseball coaches when I was a kid lost his glass eyeball in an elevator shaft. The maintenance guy gave him a solid "what the frick." One time we were doing a rip-out at an old factory. They were gutting them and turning them into luxury apartments. The elevator that we were taking out was a crappy old freight that hadn't run in years. When we finally ran it up, we went down to inspect the pit. It smelled like a dead body had chilled there for half a century. The bottom floor wasn't lit, so I shined my flashlight under the elevator, and the whole floor started moving. Roaches. Nasty. Haven't really found anything fun in my time. I've cleaned out more pits than I could count to. I gave my mum a cheap ring I found a pair of underwear at a hotel, and I found a full packet of transcribed documents at a courthouse. Oh, and I was on a mod once, and one of the hoistway doors had an advertisement sticker for a tennis restringing service. Which was weird because it was somewhere only an elevator guy would be able to reach. I called the number, but it was out of service. I found some cool graffiti from the 40s. That's about it. I've worked on escalators for a year and a half. There was a lot more in those pits. I was taking home bent-up quarters every day. There were lots of shoe bits, and I was always nervous of coming across used needles in certain units. I do work at a large hotel. A few years ago, one of our elevators stopped working. Turned out when they opened it up, they found a 3-foot pile of guest folios that were never delivered to rooms. Later, when we looked on the camera, we found it was a security guard that got tired of delivering them to the rooms and instead dropped them down the elevator shaft. He did this for months until he was caught. As an elevator technician, this question should be my jam, but unfortunately I've never found anything interesting. A $2 coin once, a dime bag of some unknown substance, plenty of syringes, or sets of keys. It's mostly just people's junk mail and empty chip bags down there. I had a coworker who was opening a candy bar and dropped it down the shaft by accident. Hopefully the building's rats were able to enjoy it. I think those rats prefer the term elevator maintenance folk. The elevator guys in my dad's office complex found pieces of a dog's skeleton. Not the whole skeleton, just random parts. I wonder who was dropping poor Fido down the shaft piecemeal and from where. There was logistical effort involved in this very sad incident. I worked in hotel maintenance. A guest reported waterfall sounds in an elevator shaft en route to the lobby. An investigation ensued. A sump pump at the bottom of the shaft was running water constantly. Water is still coming out of the drain it's connected to after I unplug it. Find out from notes from third shift maintenance that multiple first-floor rooms had repeated clogged toilets all night long. The plumber called. A 6-inch sewer drain for the entire building is clogged. Worst clog I've ever seen in 15 years. Washcloths and TP. Over 7 inches of clog in the pipe. Apparently it was clogged so badly that it was backing up to the laundry room and the drain for the elevator shaft and the rooms closest to the main pipe out of the building. This was on the first-floor suites. There were solid turds at the bottom of that shaft after that event. I quit about a week later for unrelated circumstances. In conclusion, turds. I found keys and trash, bugs if the building is exceptionally crappy, mostly just dirt and rust. I found a paint roller that the last guy left there once. It was stuck to the floor. Not a whole lot of weird stuff can make it between the sill and the landing. Surprisingly, nothing too extreme. I'm an electrician, so we will find ourselves in a pit from time to time. Some ID badges, credit cards, coins. Once I found a red pen. It was out of ink, though. I worked security in a large department store. We routinely had to pop it open to retrieve dropped keys, wallets, and phones. Recovered a $2,500 gold necklace covered in poop. A would-be shoplifter darted out of our jewelry department and suitcased the necklace while in the elevator. When he realized we were waiting for him at the exit level, he went back up a floor, removed it, and dropped it down the shaft. We arrested him anyway, much to his surprise. Work for a major transit hub. We have our own trade departments. I'm in elevating. Weirdest things I've found are as follows. A Chucky doll head, 13 rubber duckies in one pit, syringes almost daily, and a silicone gimp mask. Every day is an adventure. At a place where my wife used to work, a body. There was a crash from the elevator area. The boss went to see what it was and came back white as a sheet and said, "Do not go in there." 2 maintenance guys had been working on the elevator, and one of them was in the bottom of the shaft and the other one made a small error. But I'm guessing the single most unusual item ever found at the bottom of an elevator shaft was a Wright R2600 aircraft engine on July 28, 1945, in the Empire State Building. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to work at an old 22-story building that had the first automated elevator system in our state. The idea was, in order to control the flow of people in the lobby, you would push the button for your floor and the elevator would tell you which one to get in. The elevators would make sure the crowds spread out over the big lobby. Anyway, it was the first time I'd ever seen the auto-open eyes used, too. I worked on the executive floor where the long-winded executives would often stop me as I was leaving. I got used to passing my hand through the doors to break the eye and hold the doors open. You guessed it, my left hand didn't trip the eye. The doors closed on my hand, which were prevented from closing completely because of my heavy engagement and wedding rings. Crushed the whole mess and lost a 2-carat diamond 22 stories below. My hand was only bruised, thank goodness for a safety shutoff. I like to think that someday someone will find a tiny treasure. I'm not a technician, but I can tell you some dude at some point is going to find a Kindle at the bottom of a shaft in a Toronto hotel elevator. Rules to remember. Rule 1. Always check that you zipped your carry-on and didn't leave a gap in the bottom. Rule 2. Kindles fit through small carry-on bag zipper gaps and elevator shaft gaps. Not an elevator repair person, but you'd be shocked by the number of nurses that drop their keys down the shaft. 20 stories up and 2 buildings away from the parking garage, and they already had their keys in their hand. I had to call maintenance all the time for retrieval. I once dropped my keys stepping into an elevator and they landed on the gap, with one key bridging the gap and all the others hanging down. Let me tell you, I reached down and grabbed them most gingerly. I used to keep my work security pass and the card holder in my wallet. Once my friend bumped me as we were getting out of the lift and the same thing happened. It landed straight across the gap. All those years of playing Operation finally get to pay off sooner or later. I work as a phlebotomist in a hospital and had just drawn an elderly male patient. As I pushed my little cart into the elevator to go back down to the lab, his blood vials rolled off and both went right down the gap into the shaft. I felt so bad and immediately went back to tell him I had to redraw him. He was thrilled, said he was excited his blood would be down in the shaft for eternity. Such a funny guy. Retired after 40 years in the elevator maintenance trade. The best I ever found was a $20 bill, but I know a man that found a $7,000 diamond ring he kept for 6 months and no one ever asked about it. He gave it to his wife. Empty substance bags or used rubbers and needles, money or discarded lotto tickets. Usually the norm. If you're lucky, maybe an infestation of roaches sometimes. I'm reading a lot, and I mean a lot of people in the other comments who found purple adult toys. It's all in the same shaft, so to speak. Not elevator maintenance, but one time I dropped a set of wheels for a cart in the crack. I'm sure some maintenance man is going to be concerned to find loose wheels in the elevator of a nursing home, like some elderly person is walking around with a wheelless walker. I found a doll sitting upright in a corner, and a little bag of smack. I'm willing to bet a reasonable amount that if you took the substances, then you'd wake up in the middle of the night with that doll haunting your household. Not exactly an answer to the question, but still adjacent. When we came to a call about broken doors, we were not expecting that someone, for some unknown reasons, stole 1/2 of an elevator's doors. I found a whole salmon and a king crab in the same kitchen elevator of a seafood restaurant. $100 and $20 bills and tons of syringes and rubbers. In 1988, the same bones were rediscovered when a new elevator shaft near the south parking lot on Elm Street was excavated. At that time, 11 skulls and 88 pounds of bones were found on one day, followed by 119 more pounds of bones. The Inquirer reported that they were being stored at the morgue. Cincinnati Music Hall, built on a children's home, built on a potter's field, built on a burial site, built on bulldozed indigenous mounds.
I mean, that place is definitely not haunted, right?
Holy crap, I've just asked a guy I knew who does this work last night. It wasn't surprising as I expected, just a ball, a very large ball. that had no business being able to get down there. Then I asked if he ever left anything strange down there for the next guy. He went quiet and slowly turned to me, pulling a Barbie out of his pocket.
I found the Chamber of Secrets.
You're a maintenance technician, Harry. Not in elevator repair. A few months ago, we had a floridly psychopathic patient. Think staring into space, can't form a coherent sentence, and a few other symptoms. He was brought into hospital. There was a fire alarm at an apartment building, and when the fire team went in, they somehow found this guy living in an elevator shaft. He had evidently been there for some period of time. Most of his delusions that he was talking about for me, that I could understand, were about time travel and Jesus. So we were joking a bit that he wasn't actually psychotic and was just time-traveling Jesus. It depends on the building and neighborhood. I've seen everything from dirty diapers to used needles, keys, wallets, phones, picture frames, sandwiches, and I guess the icing on the cake was a Tamagotchi. No, it didn't work, so we typically just trashed everything unless it was valuable. I always turned jewelry into the management's office, but I worked with guys who definitely sold valuables for unsavory purposes. In conclusion, that crack between the car and the door is a black hole for objects. The company where I worked had an old heavy-duty freight elevator that was semi-abandoned. It was more like an automotive lift with giant pistons embedded in the ground, but installed in an elevator shaft. When they needed to move something huge, they would fill the hydraulics with oil. It took hundreds of gallons of oil to top off the system, including the giant pistons, and then they would use it for a day. A few months later, they would try to use it again and find the oil gone. Once, they planned to use it the following day, so maintenance pumped in the oil to get ready. The next day, no oil. They refilled it the morning of the move and got one lift out of it before it stopped. The company knew it was spilling hydraulic oil into the ground under the plant and just didn't give a crap. They finally abandoned it for good when the maintenance guys threatened to report the illegal oil dumping. I had to clean some bad insulation at the top of the elevator chamber. So the maintenance guy brought the elevator to the top of the second floor and we got on top to reach up. On the elevator car were a few pairs of women's underwear and used rubbers. So someone was doing the deed on top of the elevator. How they got there was a mystery because it was a very modern one, and you need a special key to open the control box to access the top of the elevator. 100% this special key is the exact same key across thousands of elevators. Some jerk with a 3D printer, plaster, LED, and a high-resolution camera, i.e. a modern smartphone, can pretty accurately reproduce working keys from a photograph. Or you just buy the 5 most common keys on eBay for $15. In college, I pulled out my lanyard on which my Motorola Razr was sitting. My phone flew up in the air and dropped in the gap between the elevator and the floor. It dropped 4 floors. Maintenance was able to climb down there, and my phone barely had a scratch. My dad has been an elevator repairman for almost 30 years now. His best find to date was a $12,000 yellow diamond engagement ring. Tried for a while to find the owner, but eventually he got to keep it. Been in the game for 12 years now, found a full Christmas tree last month. Other finds are $5K and $20 notes, a big bag of substances, roughly 5 kilograms of brand new shoes by the boxload, and a severed finger. So backstory, the Christmas tree was found this year on a council estate in August. Photos were taken for the office as it was rather amusing. I visit this lift every month. The money and substances were found in the same lift around 3 months apart 7 years ago. The money was split between me and my engineer, as I was an apprentice at the time. The substances we handed into security. The shoes were found on a passenger staff lift out the back of JD Sports. We suspect a staff member was sticking them down there and loading them into a car at the end of his shift. Police were involved in this one. The finger was found in a very expensive apartment building. We're talking 50 floors and million-dollar apartments. Again, police and emergency medical services were involved in this one. Elevator repairman here. I haven't found anything crazy, just the normal stuff. Cockroaches, underwear, and a couple of bucks. But since you're reading this, I'll let you in on a little-known feature. Elevators have a tipping feature. If you slip money down between the sill into the pit, the elevator will get you to your floor faster. If you put in enough money, it will skip all other calls and bring you right to your floor. You're welcome. No, don't mind me down here. I found ID cards, keys, small dead animals, lizards and rats mostly, lots of cobwebs, needles, 1 AirPod, and things like that. The weirdest thing I've ever found as a repair guy is a clean pit. The service guys normally don't clean anything. I remember when I was maybe 10, I had a Nokia 3310, I believe, one of the brick ones anyway. I dropped it down the bottom of the elevator shaft in the small gap between the doors on the 6th or 7th floor. It was down there for months until I saw the elevator and maintenance man and asked if he could have a look. Not only was it still down there, unbroken, it still had battery life. Those were the days. I'm not an elevator maintenance person, but I have been in dozens of elevator shafts for work. I'm a bomb tech, and when I was in the army, I did a lot of POTUS and VIP missions in conjunction with the Secret Service. They don't have a bomb squad, so they steal us. It's a great gig, and you get to travel all over and stay in some insanely nice hotels. Anyway, the elevator shafts must be cleared to ensure there aren't any devices in there. Basically, any place that the POTUS or VIP will go needs to be checked out. I've done a fair amount of elevator surfing, which is riding on top of the car. The weirdest and funniest thing I've ever seen was a 12-inch Superman figurine that had its feet glued to the top of the elevator. The head was slightly tilted back and the arms were pointing upwards, so it appeared like Superman was flying up, up and away whenever the elevator was in use. I have a picture of it saved on an external hard drive somewhere. That crap was hilarious. What wedding moment made you think, ooh, they're not going to last long? She told me 2 days before that she found her fiancé annoying and that she didn't like him and that he was awful in bed. She was visibly, endlessly uncomfortable at the rehearsal, wedding, and dinner combo. Then she sobbed the entire morning day of. She ended up not getting any makeup done because she wouldn't stop scream-sobbing and refused to get dressed, stalling the wedding by like 35 minutes. Then she said 45 minutes of vows that she had prepared, 9 pages of things like inappropriate vows to friends, family, his parents and sisters, none of them to her husband, and then almost didn't say I do. Managed to get a, yeah, okay, yeah I do, out of her almost a full 60 seconds after she was supposed to say anything. I could go on for hours, but it was the most painful and awkward wedding I've ever been to. I've got my money on maybe 10 months. We're 1 month in. 2.5 month update, I've distanced myself from them completely. She's really clingy and likes to gossip about how awful her husband is, and I really don't have the time. She's also told me they're in couples therapy after I expressed negativity towards some extremely concerning things she said regarding their relationship and lack of communication. But I'm still betting on 10 months because she believes it's all his fault and truly believes his parents and sisters are exactly the same. Newsflash, they're all lovely people. 5 month update, I no longer associate with them, so I'm out of the loop regarding the juicy details. Last I heard, they keep moving all over the country and fight non-stop. No more lovey-dovey images on social media. Seems to be right on track for a 10-month breakup. Strangely enough, I didn't have the thought about the couple getting married, but the best man and maid of honor who were married to each other. The best man's speech was all about how hard it was to be married. I've been married for a year and it feels like 100 years. Maid of honor stands up to give a speech and just says, ditto. It was so awkward and really brought the whole room down. The brother of the bride stood up and gave a nice impromptu speech about teamwork and having a partner to go through life with. How happy the family was to have the groom join their family. Best man and maid of honor were divorced within a year. The couple who got married are still married 30 years later. I sometimes wonder if the speeches were actually helpful in how not to act as a couple. There's some complex backstory to the brother's speech. The bride's brother is gay and has been in a long-term relationship for 40+ years at time of writing. At the time he gave his speech about marriage, he couldn't marry the man he loved, and I think his passionate defense of marriage was born from that. When people would say they were against gay marriage because it makes a mockery of marriage, I'd think of that night. The married couple who had no respect for marriage could easily marry, and did over and over again. And the man who stood up and defended marriage could not. He's married now and lovingly takes care of his husband as he battles health issues. It's a special kind of thought process that leads a man to think that giving a speech about how much of a drag marriage is at a wedding will be a good idea. Well, at least he and his partner supported each other in that statement, for once. When they were doing the vows and the priest got to the for richer or poorer part, she said, for richer, or maybe poorer. The officiant wasn't pleased. I think they made it a year. I've got 2. One of my good friends got married and I'd never met her before the wedding because she's just shy. On the wedding day, she was belligerently drunk before the ceremony even started and couldn't even get through the lines she was supposed to repeat. Like, I promise to love you. She ended up slapping the groom, spilling champagne on her dress and then crying under a table while he tried to comfort her. They lasted about 4 months. Another one was my wife's friend. She's a very conservative, religious white girl who married a black man. Most of her racist family didn't approve of the marriage and didn't show up, but she planned the whole marriage around race. Like a vanilla cake for her and a chocolate cake for him, the wedding colors were black and white, and even the meals were white meat for her side and dark meat for his. It was extremely uncomfortable as a guest. They lasted 2 years, but broke up because he was nuts and attacked her, rather than the weird racial tension. My wedding. We'll start 3 days before. The wedding was a Ren Fair-style wedding outside a large gazebo, and the maid of honor had promised to purchase a stylized dress for my bride that they'd agreed on. 3 days before the wedding, she calls to tell us she has no money and was embarrassed to admit it before now. So we literally hand-sewed one together in 24 hours. In my opinion, it turned out pretty nice for what we had. The bride's mother was supposed to pick up the cake in Austin, Texas, and drive an hour south for the wedding. She left her house 30 minutes before the wedding to pick it up. When she finally showed up, an hour late, the cake was destroyed. She had put it in the back seat and driven like hell all the way down, just slamming it against the box at every turn. During the 1 hour delay, there was almost a fistfight between two groomsmen because, well, the maid of honor showed up in the dress that she was unable to afford. Obvious attempt to upstage the bride. The same maid of honor during her speech after the ceremony started it off by saying, "When we all met, I didn't like Paul at all. However, I found he grows on you, like a fungus." Needless to say, my entire side of the family was super cold through all of this. Since all of these issues were on her side of friendships or families, I was told to suck it up and we'll discuss it later. I sort of assumed that a lot of these friends had just shown themselves the door. Quite the opposite. In fact, 2 years later, when I accepted my first well-paying job out of college, it became an issue that it was an hour and a half out of Austin, so she just decided to stay in ATX to be with her friends. I mailed her the divorce papers, and since she couldn't be bothered to even show up for the hearing, I've never seen her again. I used to work at David's Bridal. The bride came in with tons of friends, we did the say yes to the dress thing, and an hour later she was standing there in $3,000 worth of stuff and doesn't have any money with her or in her account. She decides she wants to apply for the store credit card. I run it through the system and she gets denied. Then she calls the groom for his info, which to be fair, people did all the time, and he tells her no. She threw a huge fit on the phone with him, standing on the bridal stage, literally demanding, "Why not? Why? Why?" Like an actual child over and over again. I've never seen a 30-year-old age backwards so quickly. She was just a brat, literally stomping her feet in front of me and all her friends and the other brides in the store. I was embarrassed. At the end of all that, she hangs up on him and her friend is like, "I'm so sorry you can't get your dress." And the bride instantly stops crying and goes, "Oh, I'll get the dress. I just have to do this at home, and when he gets mad enough, he'll come get it for me, so I'll stop." I was speechless. Sure enough, the girl came back 2 days later with her man, and he applied for the credit card and brought the dress. He was livid and silent, and she was smug as hell. Can't imagine they're living a happy marriage if they're still together. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. The bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, and other things. Note that I said extra stuff. It was already decorated by the venue, she just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago, she sends my mother-in-law, the groom's mum, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she brought. $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mum's side. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students, and many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of honor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me, babe, like the previous time you called me." The other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the whole thing was a bunch of emotionally messed up 20-year-olds or one big piece of performance art. As a man who has dabbled in theatre at a couple of different levels, I can confirm that drama students who take classes together have often seemed like a weird incestuous family. It's fine up until someone inevitably gets jealous. I was the maid of honor. Me, the best man, and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. The bride excused herself to go to the bathroom, and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking. Her cooking is something she's really passionate about, by the way. He was making these comments to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together, and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her, but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months. A fun, light-hearted dance with the groom, followed by a close and slow dance with her male best friend. How long did that marriage last? It lasted 18 months, and now she's living with the friend. He ended up in the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He'd gone out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to hold a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding photos. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight, she left the house, and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. The groom showed up to his own wedding reception wearing a t-shirt with restroom sign-style stick figures depicting a bride and a groom, captioned, "Game Over." The bride had a bruised eye covered by makeup. Also, it was visible that walking was hurting her. I might think it was because the corset was pushing on broken ribs. It took her 3 years to run away. When my sister married her first husband, she mouthed to my father walking her down the aisle, "I can make this work, right?" They were divorced 6 months later. My whole family knew it wasn't a good idea since the original engagement was a year prior. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When the bride drank vodka out of a pint glass and spent a significant amount of time making out with another guy on the dance floor. Oh well, the first part isn't necessarily a deal breaker. One of the best weddings I've ever been to included an Olympics between the bride and her bridesmaids, Russian, and the groom and his groomsmen, Lebanese. Main event was a vodka relay where they, no crap, chugged pint glasses. Lebanese put in a fantastic showing, but the Russians mopped the floor with them without even taking their heels off. It was hilarious. They all still managed to host and throw a wonderful party for another few hours, and they've been happily married for over a decade with 3 beautiful kids. Oh, and my husband just reminded me that these motherfrickers woke up the next morning and hosted brunch for us. Unbelievable. When the bride tried to playfully feed the groom some cake, pulling it back once it got close to his mouth. The third time she did this, he slapped it out of her hand and stormed off. In the ensuing awkward silence and wide-eyed staring, we all knew it wouldn't last. Surprisingly, they were together for nearly 2 years before the bride eloped away with her stepbrother. No one saw that coming. Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. "What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarrassing me." We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to break dance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery, he can't turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's freaking insane. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms, and the girl next to me, the groom's ex, drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. I was at a wedding, I was a +1 for my date. The bride sat down drunk at our table and started talking to us. She then told me that she slept with her ex right before walking down the aisle. She screwed her ex in her wedding dress in the bridal suite. She then downed the last of my drink and went off to the dance floor. I was left speechless. I didn't know anyone but my date. Less than a year later, the bride and groom were divorced. He got so messed up at the reception, he had a fistfight with her cousin in the toilets over some white snow. He told all of the other cousins to F off. He hit on my aunt. He told my cousin's child to come back to him when she was 15 or 16, and he forgot to bring his own child to the hotel. I mean, I see absolutely no cracks in the foundation of those nuptials, and I'm roughly 28% sure that they may still be together. I was at a wedding when a phone went off during the ceremony, in the middle of exchanging vows. It was the groom's. He took the call. They're divorced now. One of my friends got married. Afterwards, she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. When they got married illegally in high school, 2 16-year-olds from different states who had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. I actually know a happy version of this.
My high school English teacher's friend and her boyfriend took a bus to the next state over where you could get married at age 16, and so they eloped in secret and came out about it after they graduated, and have been married for over 40 years and counting. My grandmother got married at 16 to my grandfather, who was 19. World War II hit and he was leaving to fight. In her own words, I wanted to be his wife, even just for a little, and he didn't want to die before we were family. He survived, came home, and they were happily married until death did them part. Where to start? We were the bride's friends, the only people that showed up from her side for the wedding. The best man was the groom's white snow dealer who got dressed in a tux, the only one in a tux. The groom was high on white snow and giggled throughout the whole ceremony. The host of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more to tell us, "Don't smoke green herb. If she, the host's wife, won't let me smoke green herb in the house, then you guys can't either." Every time we grouped up. The morning after the wedding at campfire coffee, the new bride turned to the groom and asked, "Are you going to wear your ring every day? Because it kind of makes you look like a slur for a gay person." Those of us there side-glanced and took deep sips of coffee. I think it lasted 4 to 6 months. My brother's ex-wife. Throughout the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend who was cheap, to mingle and get shots of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she had summoned the photographer back, shouting, "Whose wedding is this? I meant get shots of people being happy for me." The groom showed up drunk after golfing with buddies all day. The bride in her vows said, "For richer," and left out the poorer. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip. When I was leaving, I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's gonna be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months, I believe. One of my friends was the best man at another friend of ours' wedding. His best man speech included this line, "I prepared some lines for tonight, but the groom sniffed them all in the bathroom." 3 months later, there was a divorce due to a white snow problem. At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked green herb after the vows, was cross-faded as heck and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches, basically everyone left. Family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. The groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy, she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The guy is an absolute piece of crap and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day. I worked at a museum that also doubled as a wedding venue in the summers. As part of the wedding package, the museum would stay open after hours for the guests only, so I just sit there and greet people basically. One wedding got particularly rowdy, almost everyone was drunk, people were jumping into the fountain, and someone hurled in said fountain. At one point, the bride is crying. Turns out the groom and one of his groomsmen were doing the deed upstairs in one of the bathrooms. A fight ensued between the groom and the father of the bride, and the cops were called because it got really ugly. Entertaining for me, but I felt so bad for the bride. You know, everything about this wedding just screams British upper class, and I can't quite put my finger on why. I just can't see it happening in any other country or level of society. 2 friends of mine got married, and when they gave their vows, the guys started laughing at the part about being faithful. Whoops. I once watched a live stream of the wrong Vegas wedding. The link I was given for a friend's wedding was incorrect, and during the exchange of vows, the groom got to the part about being faithful and the bride visibly and audibly chuckled. It was hilarious to watch, but I bet they didn't last long. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over again. Why is no one having a good time? I specifically requested it. They were together since junior high and would break up and reconcile every 3 to 6 months. Everyone was just sick of it. Friends and family, and the marriage, at age 19 in the summer between freshman and sophomore year at college, was obviously an attempt to force the relationship to stick. It did not, but at least no kids got involved. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entered into a betting pool of how long the marriage would last at the wedding reception. I should say the bride and groom didn't participate, but everyone else did. That would have been glorious.
If I recall correctly, the best man won, Price is Right rules, at 14 months. The groom got into a fistfight with the father of the bride, split after 4 months. Context: the groom and bride's dad, actually most people in these families if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight though. The best man's speech was about how selfishly the groom had acted during a night out and telling him to treat marriage differently. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the whole room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. I wish I could remember the specifics, but it was all about how they were always together, all the late nights they'd spent together, etc. She was so tearful during it too. I'm not making it sound as bad as it was, but I assure you, it was bad. Portuguese wedding. A fistfight broke out at the head table during the reception, between two groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. The groom was oblivious. He came home from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. I'm surprised it took that long. The midnight buffet was amazing, though. The most beautiful wedding I've ever been to ended in divorce. The venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.